Hey, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy our audiobooks, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, feel free to share your review in the comments section below.
Michael clutched his chest, his breathing shallow, the glow of his PC screen flickering across his pale face. The dark room was silent, save for the hum of his computer. Most people feared dying alone. Michael didn't. For him, this was fine, more than fine. He'd lived exactly how he wanted: games, anime, and endless takeout. As long as he had internet, he could have lived like that forever. But 35 years of fast food and zero exercise had finally caught up to him. His body was shutting down. KHH. He choked as his vision blurred, darkness pulling him under like sleep he couldn't resist. And then, nothing. Except, strangely, his thoughts remained. He was conscious but weightless. No body, no senses, no light, only awareness. The afterlife? He wondered. He never believed in any religion, but maybe they were right after all. Hello, Michael. A voice, ethereal, calm, echoing through the void. Who are you? Where am I? First of all, I owe you an apology, the voice said. Due to an error on my part, you died too soon. You weren't supposed to leave your world yet. Michael processed this. A mistake? Only one kind of being could talk like that. You're a god, aren't you? Yes, I am. Aren't you angry? Not really. That answer seemed to catch the deity off guard. You're not going to rage at me? Demand answers? Ask why I can't simply revive you. If you could revive me, you wouldn't be wasting time explaining, Michael said flatly. So what's the point of yelling? I'm just a chill guy. The silence that followed almost felt like an exasperated sigh. I had this whole plan to play the mysterious, all-knowing God while you screamed at me. But fine. Since your death was my mistake, I'm obligated to compensate you. Don't bother. Just take my soul. And me. If I don't have consciousness, I won't know I'm missing the next anime season. Ahem. No can do. I can't return you to your original world, but I can grant you a new life in another. Michael's response was a bored, eh. The god twitched. Eh. You love anime. You love Ice Sky. Shouldn't this be your dream come true? Of course Michael knew about Ice Sky. He'd binged enough anime to understand the trope. Heroes, demons, empires, endless battles. But watching was one thing. Living it? No thanks. He'd been perfectly content with delivery food, gaming, and binge-watching shows. Why trade that for slaying monsters and fighting demon lords? Seriously, just take my soul, Michael muttered. Not possible, the god said, his patience fraying. Rules demand your soul enter another body in another world, no matter how much you complain. Fine, Michael cut in. If you've got no choice, then neither do I. Don't just shrug your non-existent shoulders at me. Already drained, the deity didn't waste another word. He invoked his power, and Michael felt himself sinking into a strange warmth, like drifting through thick, glowing water. The god's fading voice followed him down. P.S. I granted you abilities based on your desires. You'll discover them in time. And since I dragged you from your comfy life, I gave you a little bonus. You've been reincarnated as the youngest son of the richest family in the world. So enjoy your life of luxury, Mr. Stoic. The baby in the doctor's hands didn't wail. He just stared around with wide, confused eyes, like someone who'd walked into the wrong movie theater. Doctor, is my baby okay? The man in the white coat raised his glowing hands. A soft green light pulsed from his skin, and an illusion of vines and leaves shimmered across his face. He studied the infant carefully. Strange, there's nothing wrong with him physically. While his parents panicked, Michael was busy processing his new reality. His gaze swept across the room. The glowing man holding him? Definitely the doctor. He was the one who had pulled Michael from his mother's womb. Speaking of his mother, she lay exhausted on the bed, golden hair spilling across the pillows. Her face was beautiful, her expression worried. In his old world, she would have been scouted by a K-pop idol agency before she even hit high school. Next to her stood his father, broad shoulders, sharp beard, regal uniform. He looked like a decorated war hero straight out of a medieval portrait. Are they seriously cosplaying during my birth? And why does this place look more like a castle bedroom than a hospital? This is your home. A home birth? But didn't God say I was going to be born into the richest family in the world? Shouldn't there be, actual medical equipment? This world has no machines. Michael froze as the doctor holding him suddenly glowed brighter. That green light wasn't just for show, it was magic. Wait, what? I detect the doctor's use of examining magic. Magic? His heart skipped. Then again, he shouldn't have been surprised. God knew about his obsession with anime and fantasy. Of course, he'd toss him into a magical world. Would you like to learn more? Yeah, sure. Analyzing magic. Magic theory acquired. Medical eyes. Attribute. Earth and light. Ability. Allows the user to scan a body for illness, injury, or abnormality. A translucent screen popped into Michael's vision. It looked exactly like the system windows from his favorite anime and novels. If I can copy magic just by seeing it, this world might actually be better than my old one. Spells can do things tech never could, like lifting boulders with a flick of the wrist or solving water shortages with a single chant. Michael smirked inwardly. All right, this could work. Born rich, magic everywhere, servants at my beck and call, sounds comfy. There's a high probability your parents will hire tutors to train you in administration. Not happening. Why would I study when I've got an AI assistant to do everything for me? But just as he started to relax, he looked around the room and froze. No lights, no fans, no air conditioning, just flickering candles and oil lamps. Wait, no electricity? Slowly, the truth sank in. The home birth, the primitive decor, the fancy medieval outfits. He hadn't just been reborn into the richest family. He'd been reborn into the medieval era. God damn it. Even kings here live worse than middle-class nobodies back home. Then came the smell. What is that? Detected. Human feces. Feces? Hold up. What about toilets? There's a high probability this world lacks plumbing. Michael's soul shattered. No. The cry of despair finally broke free. Not the cry of a newborn, but the scream of a man who just realized he had been scammed. He was supposed to live a life of luxury. Instead, he was trapped in a world without even a toilet. It had been a few days since his birth, and all Michael did was lay in his crib all day long. Usually, novels and anime would skip this part of the reincarnation or have a time skip to the time when the protagonist could actually move around a bit. But Michael? He was stuck experiencing every boring second of his new, mundane life. The only form of entertainment to keep him occupied was the spinning birds installed on top of his crib. That wasn't nearly enough. How's my dear baby boy? What the? Why can I suddenly understand my mother's words? I have gathered enough data to form a rudimentary understanding of their language. For your convenience, I have automatically translated their words into something your brain can understand directly. Having ChatJK1 by his side turned out to be a literal godsend. If the AI was this intelligent, it could help him figure out the world faster, and perhaps it could make up for the fact that God had thrown him into a medieval world. The best part? It was that he didn't even need to ask the AI to do that for him. It must have listened to all the maids and butlers talking outside his room and decided to decipher the language all on its own. Isn't my Michael just the cutest? Tell me he's cute, his mother cooed. Yes, madam. The young master is the most adorable child I've ever seen. The maid next to her replied dutifully. Michael was surprised to find that his name in this world also turned out to be Michael. He didn't mind the coincidence. His mother reached down to his crib and pinched his cheeks. Ow! Michael cried internally. Madam, you may have hurt the young master. Oh, silly me. It's just that my baby is so cute. I couldn't help myself. Michael didn't mind his mother's overbearingness. She had given birth to him, after all. In the first few days of his birth, she had watched over him without missing a beat. She could have passed him off to her maids, but she insisted on caring for him personally. Why don't you come and meditate with me? Who knows, maybe he'll be a genius with the earth element like me. His mother then lifted him from his cradle and sat cross-legged on the floor before placing him on her lap. Then she tickled his sides, making him squirm. My dear Michael, I'll teach you everything there is to know about magic when you're old enough, she said proudly. Humph. Your father says he wants to hire a tutor, but that's unnecessary. I can teach you all by myself. Once she was ready, she closed her eyes. Her previous playful expression gave way to one of deep concentration. Then, something incredible happened. Suddenly, Michael saw strange moss-green particles, each no bigger than a grain of sand, appear in the room. These blobs of floating particles slowly swirled around his mother's body before eventually seeping into her skin. What's she doing? What are those things? Those are individual earth element mana particles. She is gathering them around her body and storing them deep in her core. Michael immediately recognized this technique from fantasy anime. If he wasn't mistaken, this was a form of exercise or technique for mana cultivation by drawing mana for later use. He was mesmerized by the sight. This was the most fascinating thing he had seen since being reincarnated in this world. For a good hour, his mother meditated by herself, gathering all the earth elements in her body until she finally opened her eyes, looking slightly drained. She then smiled at him, kissed his forehead, and placed him back in the crib before leaving. Even after she was gone, Michael was still reeling from seeing mana in action. Can I learn how to do that? Analysis complete. Magic gathering theory obtained. Would you like to start gathering mana? Of course, Michael said yes. If it meant that he could see those enchanting particles again, it would completely solve his boredom during this baby phase. He would be accomplishing two things at the same time. He would be increasing his strength while also keeping himself entertained while staying in his crib all day. Downloading theory complete. Suddenly, Michael felt a surge of information flood his mind. Without even thinking about it, he closed his eyes and instinctively started meditating, just as his mother did when gathering mana. He didn't know how to explain it. It felt like instinct. It was as if he had gained another arm that only had the express function of gathering mana. Gradually, the entire room began to glow with particles of different colors. There was green, blue, red, and silver, each floating around the room like tiny specks of dust. If green is earth, does that mean blue is water, red is fire, and silver is air? That's the basic element in most fantasies. That is right. The elements available in this room are made up of the four main elements. Michael closed his eyes and concentrated on his body, creating a sort of vortex or tornado deep in his abdomen that pulled all the particles in the surroundings toward him. Slowly, every single elemental mana seeped into his skin, gathering in his core. Gradually, he realized that four minuscule pebbles had started to form in his body, each having the same color as the four elemental mana. Once these pebbles had formed, the different kinds of mana automatically sorted themselves into their respective stones and continued to grow. If I can absorb all four, does that mean I can control all the natural elements? Yes, that is right. However, that may not be the extent of your abilities. There is reason to believe that there are other elements in this world, ones that are not currently present in the room. You may be compatible with them as well. It seemed that the god hadn't been stingy on his blessings. Right now, Michael had become like the main characters in anime, those who could master every element. This is good, but it's exhausting. Despite having only started doing it a few seconds ago, he had already started to feel breathless. I'm tired. Commencing automatic mana absorption during sleep. Michael closed his eyes and let fatigue take over his small body before drifting into slumber. Even in his sleep, mana particles continued to seep into his skin. Later, his mother entered the room. She noticed the usual abundance of earth element mana had lessened, but dismissed it as nothing more than a coincidence, unaware that it was her son who had absorbed it all. Months passed, and Michael continued with his duties as a baby, doing nothing but sleeping all day. The only thing keeping him sane was mana gathering. Every day, he would pull in as many mana elements as he could from the surroundings and reinforce the elemental stones within his body. With time, he noticed that as he gathered more elements, his sensitivity to those elements became much finer and improved greatly. He could now distinguish the amount and the type of elemental mana the air was composed of with ease. But that wasn't the only benefit of constantly gathering mana in his body. Somehow, it had allowed him to strengthen his infant body to the point where he could almost stand up. Of course, he only practiced this when he was all alone, which, by the way, wasn't as long as he wanted. If he wasn't being cradled in his mother's arms, then he would probably be getting teased and coddled by one of the maids. Somehow, they had taken quite a liking to him. They carried him around the mansion, showing him everything there was to see, all while gleefully pinching his cheeks. It seemed that the god had blessed him with both cuteness and handsome traits. He was, as they say, suffering from success. And as strange as it sounded, it took a long time, nearly 2 months, before Michael could learn his mother and father's names. This was because his mother insisted on him calling her mommy. Meanwhile, his father was rarely home. From what he understood from their little spats, he realized that his father was busy dealing with a business that took him most nights out of the house. His mother didn't like that very much and would always complain about it to him. Something about the parched lands or whatever, though he had no idea what that was. But only after listening intently to the maid's gossip was Michael able to figure out that his mother's name was Lilia, while his father's, Bart. As for himself, his full name was Michael von Vanderbilt. The Vanderbilts were supposedly the richest and most influential family in the world. At least, that's what the god said. Since Michael hadn't been out of the house, he couldn't compare how luxurious his current life was compared to the state of the world outside. But as rich as they were, they didn't even own a single air conditioning unit. He was only banking on the fact that he was due some hefty inheritance from his family. He could use that fortune to make his life easier and more comfortable for as long as he could live. But for now, that would have to wait until he got older. Right now, he had no choice but to continue living his daily baby life. Soon, Michael turned 1 year old. In the Vanderbilt family, that became a very big deal. His mother wasted no time and immediately ordered for a small venue to be built near their house where they could celebrate his birthday. This was perhaps Michael's first clue as to how incredibly wealthy his family was. That little venue his mother had made for him, it was the size of a football stadium. They had to take a carriage just to go from one end to the next. And that wasn't the worst part. She was actually dissatisfied with how small it was. Her exact words were, "I'm sorry, baby. I'll make sure to build a bigger one next year. It's ridiculous how little we're spending for your first birthday, but we just have so little time. But don't worry, I already had the next venue started early." Just the manpower alone needed to construct this so-called little venue was staggering, far beyond what Michael could even count. Because there were no bulldozers or excavators in this world, everything was done by hand. He watched as mages cast spells to topple down trees and crush boulders. There must have been more than 10,000 of them working day and night to construct the venue for his first birthday. Magic theory acquired. 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 The best part about this whole thing was that he was able to witness firsthand how mages cast spells. With his natural sensitivity to elemental mana, he was able to see how they absorbed and released mana out of their bodies to shape their spells. If someone wanted to summon a gust of wind that was strong enough to knock down a tree, then air mana needed to flow from their abdomen to their hands before transforming into magic the moment they released it into the world. And thanks to ChatJK1, he was able to decipher the theory behind those spells, allowing him to replicate the spell himself. Of course, he just needed to gather enough mana to try himself. As soon as he was back in his cradle, Michael wasted no time and right away began trying out the spells. Tornado. Air element. This magic allows the user to summon a huge whirling tornado that pulls everything in its path. Michael tried to cast this spell, but quickly found that he didn't have nearly enough mana to do it. Most of the spells he had learned from the workers were 2-star spells or above, which were far out of reach for the current him. Fortunately, he had also found 4 spells that only had a 1-star rating. Water ball. Water element. This magic allows the user to create a water sphere. Ember. Fire element. This magic allows the user to create a small fire from the tip of a finger. Rock throw. Earth element. This magic allows the user to manipulate small rocks and hurl them outwards. Wind blow. Air element. This magic allows the user to create a gust of wind in the targeted direction. Closing his eyes, Michael concentrated and allowed the elemental particles to flow out of his abdomen and into the tip of his hands. First, a small glob of water materialized on top of his left palm. It was barely the size of his tiny fists, but it was enough proof that he could indeed cast spells. Even as a baby, he didn't want to stop there. He cast another spell. This time, a tiny rock materialized beside the floating glob of water. Then, he raised his finger, creating a flickering flame that was no larger than a candle's flame. These three elements floated in the air. And with the final spell, Michael conjured a gust of wind that threw all the three elemental manifestations towards the wall. Tuck! Finally, Michael's first birthday had arrived, and it was time for celebration. The past days had flashed by in a blur, all because of a little incident that happened in his crib. Somehow, burns and water stains had appeared on the wall, and while they were tiny, it was alarming enough to send the entire household into a frenzy. Upon investigation, they quickly found out that it had traces of magic, meaning someone cast a spell in the room of the young master's room. Even though it was a minor incident, Michael's mother reacted as if he had barely survived an assassination attempt. The number of maids was doubled, security tripled, and Michael was forced to sleep in his mother's room for the time being. Michael thought it was an overreaction until he overheard from the maids about how this little incident had become the talk of the entire nation. Magic investigators quickly found out that the spell had originated from a single person and had been cast simultaneously. No big deal, at least that was what Michael thought. But then he learned that having multiple elemental affinities was considered extremely rare. Having dual elements would already place you into the genius category, while those having three elements were considered transcendent talents. But having all four elements? That was the talk of legends. Somehow, or some way, this once-in-a-thousand-year genius had managed to sneak into the youngest son of the Vanderbilt family and cast 4 harmless one-star spells. It didn't make sense. It was then that Michael decided to be a little more careful with his spells. Who knew how they would react when he revealed that he was the one who cast those spells, all while being a baby? Eventually, the commotion died down. Since nothing was stolen and no one was harmed, the authorities chalked it up to some weird natural phenomenon. But, of course, his mother had a different take. Once her worry subsided, she couldn't help but brag to her friends about how blessed her son was. It was quite interesting to see just how quickly she switched. 1 second, she was worried sick, and the moment the investigators told her it was a natural phenomenon, she was all smiles and beaming with pride, convinced that God had personally blessed Michael with talent. Michael decided to tell her the truth when he got older. Technically, she is correct. God did bless you with this life and all your powers. Yeah, but she doesn't have to know that. And if she gets to know, she'll brag about it at any chance she gets. Case in point, during Michael's birthday celebration, she personally greeted all the high-profile guests and introduced him to them personally. She was like a broken record, saying the same words of praise about Michael to the guests. Thankfully, his father stepped in before Michael got too irritated. If it hadn't caused a commotion, Michael would have climbed out of the stroller and left the party by himself. But since he had to act like a baby, he had to stay still in his stroller, looking at nothing but his mother's endless bragging. In the meantime, he decided to gather more mana. He made sure to gather as little mana as possible, careful as to not arouse any suspicion. Eventually, he got tired and drifted off to sleep. But just as he was about to fall into slumber, he seemed to have heard a peculiar conversation between his parents and some guests. "I have to give it to you, Vanderbilts. You've made such a nice-looking son," some elderly guy remarked. "All thanks to my genes, of course," Michael's mother replied. "Though I guess my husband did give him some of his nice traits." The old man chuckled. "Indeed. I must admit, I envy your lineage. Perhaps we can arrange something that will benefit both families? As you know, my daughter was just born." Michael's mother leaned in slightly. "I'm listening." Time passed, and Michael had now turned 5. He stood in front of the mirror, staring at the reflection of a dashing young boy. He had his mother's golden hair and his father's sharp jawline. Raising his hand to cast a spell, he created a blob of water that was much larger than his head. The amount of the elemental mana in his body had transformed by leaps and bounds. He could even fill up the water in his bathtub with a single spell, which was surprising because this was the level of water that he had seen only those adult mages could accomplish. At 5 years old, he could cast a spell the way a 25-year-old adult would struggle to achieve. The best part wasn't his power, but rather his control. Instead of simply being a blob of water, it obeyed his will. He could stretch, compress, and shift its shape as if it were an extension of his own body. If he wanted, he could even command the water to wash him in an instant. But of course, that would raise suspicion. "Young master, I'm coming in the bathroom," Beretta called as she entered the bathroom, carrying a large bucket of water in her hand. She was one of Michael's maids and the one in charge of helping him bathe. If Michael used his magic spell to wash himself, Beretta would immediately notice that something was off. After all, there still wasn't any water in the bathtub. She had only just brought the first bucket right now. This is so inconvenient," Michael uttered in disappointment. Whenever he had to wash himself, Beretta would have to fill a bucket with water and slowly fill his bathtub with it. She had to go all the way to the backyard well, making 5 trips just to fill the tub. "This is what I hate about the medieval times," he grumbled. "I took the faucets for granted in my old world. I wish I had that here. If only I knew how it worked, I would build one myself." Unfortunately, Michael had never been good at studying, so he didn't even know how the modern-day faucets worked. "Would you like to learn how a faucet works?" ChatJK1's timely suggestion startled Michael. You can do that. His personal AI assistant didn't waste any time and downloaded the information directly into his mind, giving him mechanical insight into how faucets worked. I can build this." Suddenly, a flood of information washed over his mind, creating diagrams and blueprints that became embedded so deep into his memory that he felt as if he knew those blueprints like the back of his hand. With the supplemental knowledge given by ChatJK1 of how plumbing worked, Michael understood perfectly how to construct the faucet by himself. "Yes, did you say something, young master?" Beretta had entered just in time to catch Michael practically dancing up and down in joy. "Oh, it's nothing." Michael tried to hold in his excitement. However, the prospect of building his own running water source made him extremely happy. With that, he would be one step closer to his ideal life of comfortability. Foo. So the young master's already at that age, huh? Oh, it's nothing. I'll leave you to enjoy your bath, young master. Beretta poured the bucket of water, but it barely filled the bathtub. She would need a few more trips to the well to completely fill it up. As she turned to leave, she winced slightly, a sharp pain flaring in her back. She didn't show it to the young master and continued to act as if she was fine. "I prepared your clothes in your room, young master." "Okay, thank you." Michael sank into the water, already planning how he was going to create his faucet. Meanwhile, Beretta finally left the room. The moment the door shut behind, her mask slipped and exhaustion crept onto her face. One of the maids approached her and asked, "Are you all right?" Beretta waved off the young maid. "It's fine." However, the young maid could see the pained expression on Beretta's face. It worried her. The veteran maid wasn't exactly young enough to wave off this ailment like she used to when she was young. "It's because you keep bringing up water for the young master. You don't have to do that. We have plenty of water mages employed in the house. They could summon water for the young master in a single second." Beretta shook her head. "Nonsense. The young master wants his water a little bit warmer. The water the mages summon is always too cold." The young maid couldn't help but sigh. "Just because of that, you're breaking your own back? You pamper the young master too much." Beretta simply smiled. "It's fine. I like it. It's the young master, after all." After washing himself, Michael immediately made his way towards the house library. This was the place that contained numerous books about a variety of things, from history to the world outside. As expected of the wealthiest family in the world, they could afford to spend the budget of an entire mansion just to create an unparalleled collection of books from every corner of the globe. The library itself was so massive that, in his old world, it could have been considered a mansion in its own right. He spent minutes just wandering around the library, trying to find a section about the topic he wanted to know about. Finally, he came across it, Vanderbilt history. Before he figured out how to create the necessary equipment for his faucet, Michael first needed to know if it was feasible to even install plumbing in this house in the first place. This meant that he needed to see the blueprint of the entire house and study its entire structure. Michael simply couldn't create the equipment if he didn't know where he was going to install it. So he wanted to get the lay of the land first and foremost. Finally, he saw a book placed at the top of the shelf labeled Bart Vanderbilt Mansion. Exactly what he needed. Climbing the ladder, he finally grabbed the book he needed and immediately sat on a desk before parsing through the pages. Of course, it was all in this world's language. It didn't matter, though, because all he needed was his personal AI assistant to do all that work for him. So he just continued flipping through the pages. Can you find the optimal placement for the plumbing system? Yes, I can. Analyzing. Michael continued flipping through the pages and let ChatJK-1 process the information and put it into his mind. If an outsider were to look at him right now, they would think he was just pretending to read like an adult. After all, he was flipping through the pages, his eyes barely drifting across the pages, and never even bothered to read them. Analysis complete. Would you like me to tell you the optimal location for the plumbing system? Tell me. Suddenly, another burst of information flowed into his brain, revealing tons of intricate details about the mansion's internal structure. But that wasn't all. He saw the end result of his project. ChatJK-1 provided a fully rendered holographic image in his mind, showing the completed plumbing system of the mansion as if it was already installed. Good, now I just need to learn how to make it. According to the specifications given to him by ChatJK-1, the pipes needed to be made out of copper. Fortunately, copper wasn't a unique resource in this world, and with the help of his family's vast wealth, he could easily obtain it. As for shaping them into pipes, that part was easy as well. He had already acquired a repertoire of production-type magic spells from the mages who constructed his birthday venue. Thanks to his early gathering of mana, Michael was already able to use 2-star magic at the ripe age of 5. That was crucial, as both Metal Bend and Metal Fuse were 2-star rated magic spells. Though he still didn't know much about spells and their rankings, for what he had experienced so far, it seemed that the primary difference between 1-star and 2-star spells was the amount of mana needed to cast them. Okay, I can start building this right now. With a determined expression, Michael walked out of the library. To build his project, he couldn't forget the most important part, gathering the materials. And to have those materials, he first needed to get permission to buy them. He made his way to a peculiar door in the mansion, his face set in a grim determination of a warrior marching into a battle. Knock, knock, come in. The door opened to reveal the person on the other side of the room, who had a wide smile on their face as if they knew they had complete power over Michael. Mother, I've come to bargain. Oh, and what is it that you want, my dear boy? She said while lazily fanning her face with a handkerchief. I need to buy something. His mother stood up and walked to the glass window next to her bed, gazing outside. And why should I do that? Michael gritted his teeth. In exchange, you can pinch my cheeks. 5 times. Her eyes gleamed. Deal. And just like that, Michael had secured his materials to finally start his plumbing project, though by the end of the day, his cheeks were left red and swollen. Michael finally received the long-awaited shipment of materials in a box. Since the Vanderbilt family was involved in a lot of businesses, they had easy access to various metals from their warehouses and provided the young master with everything he needed. As for where he was going to create his project, Michael already had an idea. The advantage of having a vast estate in the middle of nowhere was the sheer amount of empty space. The Vanderbilt house was nestled deep in a forest, with mountains and hills surrounding them. It was a quiet, secluded place, far away from the prying eyes of other people and devoid of any dangerous animals. Michael felt confident that he could work undisturbed and alone to set his plan into motion. Using his improved physical abilities and with the help of the 1-star magic spell, Air Jump, Michael jumped over the estate's walls and sneaked out of the house unnoticed. I need a place where I can work on my projects without any distractions. ChatJK-1, can you find a suitable place like this? Understood. Analyzing location, scanning. Location found. Suddenly, Michael saw a giant arrow before his eyes, pointing deeper into the forest. After following the directions it showed him for a few minutes, the young man found himself at the base of a small mountain, where a flat rock wall stretched before him. I like what you're thinking. I can carve out a small cave here. Summoning his one-star spell, Boulder Crush, Michael slowly began carving the wall. Upon unleashing the spell, a blast of force hit the rock face, and a shallow, half-sphere indent that was the size of a basketball appeared on the flat wall before it turned into nothing but dust. Wow, this is going to take a while. And so, Michael got to work. He spent days painstakingly working on carving out what he called the project room. This process accomplished two purposes. First, he was able to create an isolated room all for himself. And second, he was able to practice his spell casting and refine the mana in his body to strengthen its reserves. At last, after about 20 days of earnest work, Michael finally completed making his project room. He had created a 20 by 20-meter chamber inside the mountain, with a ceiling that stood 5 meters above the floor, enough to be considered very spacious. Using the 2-star spell, also Metal Bend, Michael was able to make tables, chairs, and desks made out of metal. This was good practice for honing his skills for more intricate projects, like constructing pipes for his faucet. With everything in place, he was finally ready to begin. Duck, duck, duck. Loud hammering noises echoed through the Vanderbilt mansion, sending vibrations through the walls and startling everyone. Even the maids down in the kitchen could feel the tremors. "What is going on up there?" one of the maids asked. "It's the young master," Beretta replied. "He's doing something in secret. He said that no one should bother him." "What's with all that noise, though? It sounds dangerous. Should we stop this?" "Sir and madam won't be back for a whole month." The maids exchanged uneasy glances and were getting anxious about the young master's actions. Even though his mother had given him free rein to do whatever he wanted while they were out of town, the maids didn't think the young master would do something that could cause this much commotion. It sounded as if he was destroying the mansion itself. Then there was a sudden silence. After a few minutes, Michael strolled down into the kitchen house, garnering strange gazes from all the maids, thanks to the dust and concrete debris covering all of his face and clothes. "Working hard, or hardly working? Ha ha, all in a day's work," Michael quipped before pouring himself a cup of water. Wiping the sweat off his forehead, he took another refreshing sip. "Well, good day to you all." With that, he turned and headed back upstairs to his room and continued his mysterious little project that started shaking the whole mansion yet again. The maids were simply left speechless. Michael's excitement couldn't get any better. After a few more days of hard work, Michael was finally able to complete his faucet project. Stepping into his bathroom, he admired his creation, a simple faucet sticking out on one of the walls. It looked more like a bent pipe with a simple lever on top. Under this faucet was a small bowl with pipes on the bottom leading down to the floor. Finally, it was time for the moment of truth. Michael twisted the lever on the faucet. A second later, a gurgling sound echoed through the pipes, and after a few tense seconds, the first few drops of water trickled into the sink. Then, the drops gradually turned into a thin line before finally forming a steady, thick stream of water. "I did it!" Michael shouted, his voice bursting with joy. He scooped up water from the sink and splashed it all over himself, laughing. After about a month of relentless hard work, all his efforts had finally paid off. To make this work, Michael had built a large water tank at the top of the mansion. By using a combination of gravity and air pressure, he ensured that the water would freely flow through the pipes, as long as they were positioned below the tank itself. Of course, laying down those pipes on the floors and in the walls wasn't easy. He had to break down parts of the wall and the flooring, making the room and the house look like it was ravaged by a maniac. But that didn't matter. This was one step closer to recreating the comfortable life he had back in his old world. Not only that, it was a technological breakthrough in this world as well. "Young master, I think we need to talk about the noises." Beretta walked into Michael's room, heading directly to the bathroom to confront him. When she noticed all the destruction and dust around the room, she had every intention of scolding him that he shouldn't destroy the house just because he wanted to. But then she saw the faucet. The water was still gushing from it, as if there was a raging river behind those pipes. She was left speechless, dumbstruck. Young master, what is this? Michael grinned. Oh, this? It's called a faucet. It's just something that I made as a hobby. Want to try it? Beretta was intrigued, but she was still apprehensive and hesitated. She didn't know what kind of magic it was that could allow water to flow through that faucet. As she moved closer, Michael suddenly splashed some water on her from the sink, making her flinch in surprise. The instant the warmth of the water hit her skin, she realized something. This wasn't water made out of magic. This was water drawn straight out of the well. It was natural, but how could this be? And soon, a whole crowd of maids had crammed themselves into Michael's bathroom. Their eyes were wide open, and all were marveling at the strange, non-magical water that was flowing through this thing called a faucet. This doesn't make any sense. How is it coming so fast? Is there someone pushing the water from behind it? Beretta stared down Michael. Young master, did you make this yourself? He nodded. How? They all asked at once, their eyes burning with curiosity. Michael simply shrugged his shoulders. It's nothing special, really. I just used the gravity and pressure to my advantage. To explain in easy terms, water flows down because of gravity and if you connect pipes to it properly. He then began giving them a small lecture on how water pressure worked. Of course, these were all the words that he had picked from ChatJK1, which was why he sounded so confident, like he knew what he was doing. The maids, however, had no idea where all this knowledge had come from. And as they listened to the young master's words, they couldn't help but be awed and shocked at his apparent intelligence. They initially thought that the faucet was magic, but when they heard how simple the concept was, they couldn't believe no one had ever thought of it before. Young master, you're a genius, one of the maids praised him. We must tell this to Madam at once. She'll be thrilled to learn that he is not only sharp in looks, but also in mind. Michael raised his hand, stopping them right away. I'd appreciate it if you don't tell my mother about this before she gets home. I don't want to interrupt their business. The only reason why Michael had been able to experiment so freely in the mansion was because his parents were out of town for a considerable amount of time. No one was there to stop him. But if his mother returned home and saw this, well, he didn't know how she would react. Young master, what is this? One of the maids finally noticed the suspicious metal bowl positioned right next to the sink. Unlike the faucet that was installed in the wall, this large bowl was mounted into the very flooring. There was already water inside this bowl, yet there wasn't any faucet above it. Oh, that, Michael said casually. I call that a toilet. This was the very reason why Michael wanted running water installed in the house in the first place. For 5 long years of his life in this world, Michael had to do his business in the bushes, or worse, in a literal pot. The people here were already used to the ever-present stench of feces in this world because it was normal for them. But for Michael, who had lived in a clean world in his previous life, it was too unbearable. That was until Michael created a proper plumbing system. For now, he couldn't create a proper filtration system, so all the flushed water would simply flow down through the pipes and be emptied into a river a distance away from the house. He was planning on improving it later on, but for now, this would do. What does it do? Oh, I know. It's for drinking, right? Michael immediately shook his head. No, but I'll show you. He stepped over to the toilet and pressed a button on top of the toilet tank. And suddenly, whoosh, the water rushed down the toilet pipes and created the flushing sound that Michael was so familiar with back in his old world. The maids, however, heard something entirely different. To them, the sound was like a thunderous roar from a hidden monster, making them think that it was hidden somewhere under that toilet bowl. All the maids were caught off guard and nearly jumped out of the room. What was that? Young master, is there some kind of animal in there? Michael chuckled. No, this is called a toilet. It's where you do your business. The maids were still apprehensive of the toilet, but Michael's words piqued their curiosity. You mean business as in business? Like number 1 and number 2? Michael nodded. Exactly. You sit down in this bowl and do your business. And once you're done, you push this button here. After that, all the water is going to be flushed out, along with all the business you dropped in the toilet. And finally, you wash your hands in the faucet. Once you've done that, you're all clean. One of the maids had a curious look on her face. "Where does it go after you've flushed?" "I connected the pipes to the river near the mansion," Michael explained. They all gasped, finally realizing the potential of this toilet. After all, they were the ones in charge of cleaning all that business that everyone in the house created. They would manually shovel it out and dispose of it in the river, making for a really laborious and filthy task. They still weren't done after that. They would also spend a lot of water and elbow grease to clean the latrines or dirty pots in the house. But with this toilet, they didn't have to do that. Since everything was flushed down with a simple push of a button, they didn't have to dirty their hands. Not only that, they'll also be getting rid of the smell. This is a game changer. I've never heard of it before. Young master, this invention of yours is beyond genius. A marvelous work of water. You're even more mystifying than some mages, young master. The maids couldn't help but praise him to their heart's content. They inspected the faucet and the toilet as if they were made with nothing but pure gold. Some of them got so excited with the fascinating running water of the faucet that they ended up splashing themselves with the water in a playful manner. "Ah," Michael laughed. He had the same reaction with them the moment he finished the plumbing system and it started working. Okay. Enough of that. This is unbecoming of you guys. We are professional." Beretta immediately stopped the young maids from being too rude. They were having fun and playing as if this wasn't the young master's personal bathroom. They were already being disrespectful the moment they crowded the room. "Out, all of you, before I tell the madam that you all went to the young master's room." Panic flashed across their faces, and the maids quickly straightened their backs before rushing out of the room, completely terrified about the prospect of the madam getting jealous of them. Beretta also followed them and left the room, making sure to keep them in line. In the end, Michael was left all alone to enjoy the fruits of his hard labor. The next morning, Beretta was jolted awake by a cacophony of maids screaming, "Kaya!" She immediately got up from her bed and rushed outside the maids' dormitory, expecting to find something kind of horrible disaster to have happened. But when she looked down at the atrium, she didn't see anyone at all. In fact, it was eerily empty. Usually by this hour, maids would be bustling, cleaning, and tending to their chores. Yet now, there wasn't anyone there at all. No way. Following the source of the screams, she hurried to the kitchen house, where she found a crowd of maids gathered, fawning over something. "What's with all this commotion?" she asked. The young maids all turned around and faced Beretta with the biggest smiles on their faces. They quickly stepped aside and showed her what they were fussing over. And once they did, Beretta's eyes widened in shock. Near the cabinet where most plates and kitchen utensils were usually kept, there was suddenly a new fixture of a bowl sticking out of the walls. And on top of this bowl was the miraculous faucet. Not just one, but there were 3 of those, all lined up in a row. The young master must have made them last night. "Isn't this amazing?" one of the maids screamed. "We can wash all the plates here, and we don't have to go down to the well anymore." Beretta stepped over to the faucets and twisted the lever. Instantly, a steady stream of clear, non-magic water began to splash down the bowl. Shishi. And that's not even the best part. You have to see what he did to the bathroom. Before she could respond, the young maids all pushed the veteran maid towards the communal latrine. This had always been the least pleasant part of the mansion. Since it was a shared facility for all the employers of the mansion for doing their business, it didn't exactly smell like the greatest place in the world. Yet, even as they got closer, Beretta barely even smelled anything from the latrines. And as they all stepped into the room, the reason finally became clear. The entire room had now been transformed. Faucets were installed on one side of the wall, and pipes ran along the floor, ensuring that all the dirt and wastewater would flow out of the room without leaving their stench behind. On the opposite side, there were toilets installed, which had the marvelous ability to flush down business away to the river, making the bathroom as clean as it had ever been. "We've already tried it out," one of the maids exclaimed. "It works just like how the young master said it would. I'm still too scared of the flushing sound, but I think I'll get used to it in the future," another added hesitantly. Having access to clean, running water in the house was a complete game changer. The maids not only felt as if they were incredibly clean the whole day, but their work had also been reduced by a significant margin. "Did you like it?" Just then, a youthful male voice spoke up from behind the maids. Michael stood there, leaning against the wall with a knowing smile on his face. The maids let out a collective squeal and immediately rushed over to wrap him in a big hug. "Young master, I love you. I'll serve you forever. I never thought that you'd give us something so precious. Thank you. I want to stay in the bathroom forever." Michael's entire face was smothered by the maids hugging him from all sides, but he didn't exactly seem to hate it. Instead, seeing them so excited over something so basic only made him realize how low the living standards were in this world. At that moment, he made a silent vow to continue making his and everybody else's life better in the future as well. Once he managed to slip free from the overeager maids, Michael walked over to Beretta. "There's something else I want to show you," he said. The older maid glanced over to the young maids, but they looked just as confused as to what the young master was talking about. It seemed as if the bathroom wasn't the only surprise he had in store for the maids. Michael then slowly walked over to the maids' dormitory, with Beretta and the rest of the maids following behind him. The maids' dorm was a building annex to the mansion where all the maids slept and lived their daily lives outside of work. Each had their own small room and their own designated washrooms. And as they followed him, Beretta couldn't shake the feeling that he was heading towards her personal washroom. "Young master?" Beretta asked. Even though it was named as a personal washroom, it only had the bare necessities like a bucket and a dipper used to wash themselves. But when Michael opened the door, every single one of the maids stared at the strange fixture and pipe connected to the wall. There was a single pipe coming out of the wall like the faucet, but this one looked completely different than the one they had seen before. This one was saucer-shaped, with numerous tiny holes on the bottom. Michael turned to them with a proud smile. "This," he said, "is called a shower." Michael turned the lever, and suddenly, water began cascading from the tiny holes in the saucer-shaped metal, creating a miniature waterfall in the bathroom. Beretta cautiously approached the falling water from the shower. It was warm. Unlike the cold, strange water that mages conjured, this felt real, natural. "I know you don't like magic water, so I created this shower," Michael said. "You don't have to carry another heavy bucket from the well. No more straining your back." That last part of his sentence struck a chord. Beretta and the other maids had always assumed that the young master never knew of her condition. But as it turned out, he knew exactly what she was going through. "Young master, is that the reason you created this in the first place?" Michael turned around, a slight blush on his face. No, I just want to shower for myself too, that's all. And this? It's nothing. It didn't even take me that long." The young maids couldn't help but giggle behind their hands. Even when lying, their young master was so adorable. "Yeah, he's so sweet. You become much cuter, young master. He's not only smart, but he's incredibly caring as well. What a perfect man." Beretta, on the other hand, felt her eyes well up. Even though she was just a maid, the young master still treated her with a lot of consideration. This was the exact reason why she loved serving the young master, and perhaps the reason why she wouldn't mind doing so for the rest of her life. The days passed, and the word of the young master's inventions quickly spread like wildfire amongst the workers in the Vanderbilt estate. Some of the people who were out of town, while Michael created the faucets, were immediately greeted with the strange sight of maids spending an inordinate amount of their time in the kitchen house and the latrines. From the butler's perspective, the maids suddenly became addicted to washing themselves 2 times a day. It wasn't until later that day that they finally learned the truth. It seemed that the young master had installed a working shower and toilets in all the maids' quarters, allowing them to have easy access to running water without having to rely on the mages each time. As expected, the butlers were just as shocked as the maids had been when they first saw the faucets and toilets firsthand. The young master built this? A couple of the butlers were handymen as well and knew how complex it was to create the pipes and equipment needed to create this whole system. Creating such an entire water system from scratch would have been impossible without extensive manpower. Some of the more magic-savvy butlers immediately noticed that the pipes looked like they had been manipulated using a spell. It would make sense how the young master created such a perfect pipe with barely any imperfections. But that in itself didn't make sense as well. Michael was only 5 years old. He was supposed to have barely started learning about magic, much less casting advanced ones. Since they were just butlers, they couldn't question the young master himself. But on the inside, they were slightly intimidated by how much of a monstrous genius the young master was for inventing this marvelous plumbing system, as well as having the magic acuity to create them. Michael, of course, noticed their lingering stares. He knew that his secret of being able to cast spells wouldn't remain hidden forever. The maids may not have questioned how he was able to create the pipes, but his mother and father certainly would. But since they weren't here just yet, Michael's secret was still a secret for now. And to bribe the butlers for their silence, Michael went ahead and installed showers and toilets in their dormitory as well. That seemed to have done the trick, as they, too, got engrossed with the satisfying feeling of water flowing from the showers like they had their personal waterfalls. The maids were then no longer made fun of for their newfound bathing habits, because the butlers had picked them up too, twice a day. More than a week had passed since Michael installed the plumbing system, and the atmosphere in the mansion had completely transformed. The maids walked with a little bit more pep in their step, butlers walked with a little bit more swagger, and overall, everyone was more than satisfied with the changes the young master had made for them. On one particular day, while Michael strolled through the mansion, he happened upon one of the butlers carrying the carcass of a deer on his back. When he asked them, it turned out that the reason the butlers and mages were out of the mansion a week ago was because they were hunting out in the wilderness. "We're preparing for the winter, young master. We need to cure the meat now, so that we will have enough food when the scarcity hits the nation." Michael's gaze fell upon the freshly sliced open body of the deer and noticed the thick yellowish-white part of the meat. Fats. Then, a thought suddenly struck him. When taking a bath, what was the most important aspect of keeping oneself clean? The answer was soap. Now, this medieval world did have a very primitive version of the soap that he was used to. But in Michael's opinion, it wasn't up to his standards. "Hey ChatJK1, can you give me step-by-step instructions on making high-quality soap based on my previous world standard?" "Certainly. To make soap that cleanses and improves the skin, you can start by..." His AI assistant once again flooded his mind with information, giving him a simple yet comprehensive manual he could start immediately. "Can I have some of the animal fats?" Michael asked the butler. Animal fat was an important part of creating soap, which Michael knew even before he asked ChatJK1 about it. The butler looked at Michael, his expression curious as to why a 5-year-old would need animal fat. But then again, this same 5-year-old had somehow created something that not even the smartest inventors could create. So, after a moment, he relented. With that secured, Michael went ahead and asked Beretta to procure the rest of the materials he needed for his next project. "Young master, are you planning on creating something big again?" Beretta asked with a glint of excitement in her eyes after hearing about his request. "It's nothing as big as the toilets," Michael assured her, placing a hand over his chest. "But I promise I won't destroy the house again." Beretta sighed and looked over the list he gave her. "All right, young master. We'll need to travel to the next town to buy these materials. We'll be back before sunset." Beretta and a bunch of other young, eager maids quickly volunteered to accompany her for the journey. After hearing that the young master wanted to buy some peculiar materials, a lot of the maids immediately offered their services to him. They were still grateful for the toilets and the showers, but inwardly, they were expecting another great invention from their genius young master, and they wanted to be the first ones to witness it. Michael waved at them as they set off. He inwardly rejoiced. Having rich parents perfectly enabled him to complete his projects with little to no obstacles. He couldn't imagine just how difficult this would have been if he didn't have money in this medieval world. After waiting patiently until the evening, the maids finally returned with a rucksack full of materials he had asked for. Michael immediately rummaged through the bag, pulling out vials of essential oils and, most importantly, lye. Lye and animal fat were two of the main ingredients used for creating soap, so he had requested Beretta to procure a lot of them. and she didn't disappoint. Wasting no time, Michael immediately set off towards his project room near the mountain. "Come back for dinner, young master," Beretta called after him. She was already used to the young master going off on his own, so she didn't make a big fuss out of it. The next morning, Michael excitedly got out of bed and immediately rushed towards his project room. Following ChatJK1's instruction, he combined eye and animal fat and easily created a soap mixture. Last night, he poured this mixture into a mold and used a simple 1-star ember spell to speed up the curing process. And the next morning, it was finally ready. He had made soap. Michael walked into the kitchen house, where most of the maids were busy cooking something over the fire. The moment they spotted him, their faces lit up with warm smiles, and they immediately greeted him. "Young master, we made your favorite beef stew. Would you like to eat some now, young master?" "Young master." Beretta walked over to Michael, eyeing him suspiciously. She quickly noticed that he was wearing the same mischievous grin on his face as he had when he showed them the faucet. But this time, it was even more suspicious since his hands were hidden behind his back. Clearly, he was hiding something. "Hee, I just want a little feedback on my new project." The moment he said those words, the maids immediately stopped what they were doing, eager to offer their help to the young master. "Oh, what is it, young master? Does it have something to do with what you bought last night?" Michael nodded and finally revealed what he had been hiding behind his back, the bar of white soap. And immediately, a pleasant floral scent filled the air, reminiscent of flowers, wafting from the strange bar in his hands. "This," Michael declared, "is called hand soap. It is used to clean your hands, body, and pretty much everything." Michael walked over to the faucet and let the water run over his hands. Then, as he rubbed the soap, a thick lather immediately bubbled up, covering his entire hand. They knew what a soap was, but the one in the young master's hands was completely different. It smelled better than perfume, and was also a lot bubblier than even the most expensive soap available on the market. Michael then rinsed the lather off his hands and held them before the maids. "See?" One of the maids, too curious to resist, took Michael's hands and sniffed it herself. The moment she did, her eyes widened in delight, and she immediately fell in love with the lingering scent on his hands. "Oh my God, young master, this is even better than cologne. How does it still smell so good even after you washed it off?" The rest of the maids surged forward, eager to smell it, too, but Michael stopped them. "If you want, why not try it for yourself?" he said, giving them a bar of soap. The next instant, chaos erupted as the maids immediately scrambled to be the first ones to use the soap. But eventually, all of them got a chance to use the soap. "This cleans my hands so fast," one of the maids exclaimed. Normally, she would have needed at least 10 minutes to scrub the coal stains off her hands. But with this soap, it had barely taken a minute to get rid of everything. Not only that, but even her hand smelled refreshing. Seeing the maids immediately falling in love with his creation, Michael felt a burst of satisfaction. Finally, with soap and water, there was a real standard of cleanliness in this household. "To thank you for all your service, I have prepared these for all of you," Michael announced before he began walking outside and returned with a large rucksack. One by one, he handed each maid a bar of soap and a vial filled with a strange blue liquid. As expected, the maids immediately squealed with excitement once they received his very generous gift. They were so excited with the bar of soap that they almost ignored the strange liquid in the vial he had given them along with it. "Young master, what is this?" one of the maids asked, holding the vial up in the light. "That's called a shampoo," Michael explained. "Just use it on your hair during your shower, and you'll see the effects for yourselves." One of the maids popped the cork from the vial and smelled the shampoo liquid. The scent was as, if not better, than the soap. The essential oils in the shampoo were much more concentrated in it, giving it an even richer fragrance. All the maids exchanged glances, their eyes gleaming with a competitive fire. Then silence. After a few tense seconds, one of them finally had enough and shouted, "I'll take a bath first." After that, the maids all rushed to say the same. "Me too. I said it first. You've taken a shower this morning." "No, I haven't." You're the one who uses the shower every day." What followed was a flurry of arguments amongst the maids, but in the end, a good half of them immediately dashed off to their dorms, eager to try out this new soap and shampoo that the young master gifted them. Meanwhile, the rest of the unfortunate remaining maids were forced to continue the work in the kitchen house. After a while, the maids returned from the dormitory, all smelling as if they had just been frolicked through a field of flowers. Not only that, their skin seemed to be glistening under the light, free of all the dirt and imperfections, as though it had been meticulously scrubbed off. Even they couldn't help but touch their arms and faces, marveling at how smooth their skin became after using the soap. But perhaps the most striking difference was their hair. It cascaded in silky waves, voluptuous and lustrous as if coated in honey. The usual tangles and split ends had all disappeared, leaving it looking healthier than ever. The other maids would have praised the soap, but they immediately rushed back to the dormitory, eager to try it for themselves. Meanwhile, the freshly bathed maids turned their attention to Michael, showering him with praises for his generous gift. "Young master, if you give these to any lady, then I'm sure they'll marry you on the spot." "Yes, the young master will be the most sought-after man in town with this." Michael, however, wasn't thinking about girls and romance. His mind, carrying the wisdom of his past life, was far older than his body. Right now, he was focused on increasing the standard of living in this place, starting with a mansion. Now that he was done with water and proper sanitation, his next course of business was a little bit more complicated. This world still measured time with the help of sundials, hourglasses, and candles. For his next project, Michael intended to create the first mechanical clock. Since it was purely made out of gears and metal workings, it was well within his current capabilities. Of course, he still needed to master his 2-star metal bend spell to achieve the kind of precision needed for this kind of project. Metal bend. Fire and earth element. This magic allows the user to manipulate and shape metal telepathically. The strength of the spell depends on the material used and the caster's level of mastery of the spell. The following day, one of the maids is set off to the town closest to the Vanderbilt estate, Kingsbridge. This was a city of sophisticated places made for those living above normal means. Kingsbridge catered royals, businessmen, and other such wealthy individuals who stayed and lived their lives in wealth. Costella, a maid of the Vanderbilt estate, made her way toward one of the town's most exclusive establishments that only the rich women frequently visited. This was a place where wives, their daughters, and their maids frequented to have their tea and share some juicy gossip. Since Costella was a maid of the Vanderbilt estate, she had access to these high-class establishments. Inside, well-dressed women lounged at lavishly adorned tables, their conversations laced with a hint of rivalry. "Do you like it? My husband bought it for me from overseas. It's made from the pearl of the Orient," boasted one of the madams, showing off the dazzling necklace on her neck to the rest of the women sitting at the table. "How envious! I shall make my hubby buy one for me and my daughter here as well," said the woman opposite her, fluttering her handkerchief. Laughter rippled through the group of women, but even if there was a jovial atmosphere among them on the surface, beneath the facade lurked a ruthless game of status and wealth. This wasn't just a place to socialize. This was a place to brag, a battlefield of luxury. They wanted to show off how wealthy they were, how much their husbands spent to pamper them, and how much better their lives were compared to the others. It was a vicious environment. If one wasn't grossly wealthy, then they didn't deserve to participate in these kinds of gatherings. Just then, the door to the tea party opened, bringing with it the soft chimes of the bell, signaling the arrival of a newcomer. Normally, the wealthy madams would have simply given one look at Castell and immediately turned their heads away the moment they noticed her maid uniform. However, there lingered a certain smell in the air that they couldn't simply ignore. Castell walked inside and bowed to the madams before taking her place among the maids in the next room. The madams and their rich daughters all turned their noses up as they smelled the fragrant scent of flowers in the air. It was strong, but it wasn't imposing like perfume. It was subtle, yet made its mark on their noses all the same. "Do you smell that?" asked the madam wearing the pearl necklace. "I smell it too, Annie. It's really good, one of the young daughters of the table chimed in. Be honest, ladies. Did any of you spray your perfume? The women at the table shook their heads. Just then, Castell walked over to the table with a tray in her hand, carrying tea and biscuits. I apologize, madams. The Vanderbilt mistress cannot attend today's meeting because she is currently out of town for the entire month. She has asked me to come in her stead and serve you the finest biscuits and tea from our warehouse. Castell didn't notice that everyone at the table was looking at her with intense eyes. As soon as she stepped closer, the scent intensified as if she were a bundle of flowers put together. Even though the madams immediately noticed her aromatic scent, Castell herself thought that nobody might have noticed the difference and remained oblivious to their sharp gazes. The reason for that was because, according to her, nothing was unusual. Everyone in the Vanderbilt mansion smelled good. Ever since the young master gave them soap and shampoo, every member of the household washed themselves with it without any exceptions. So, to her own nose, Castell smelled no different than usual. It wasn't until the entire table fell silent for an entire minute that Castell realized that something was different with them. Have I done something wrong? She asked hesitantly. The madam with the pearl necklace finally asked. What perfume do you use? Castell was caught off guard and a bit flustered with the question. Perfume? I'm sorry, madam, but I don't wear perfume. The rest of the women at the table shook their heads, exchanging knowing glances. No need to lie. We're all women here. Now, tell us which perfume you buy to smell this good. Only then did Castell finally understand what was happening. Oh, you must be smelling my soap, she said enthusiastically. That must not be it. Soaps don't smell this good, the madam insisted, her eyes narrowing. Are you lying to us? No, madam. Castell vehemently shook her head, causing her hair to whip back and forth. With each moment of her head, the scent of her shampoo drifted over the table. One of the young daughters on the table immediately stood up to her feet and deeply inhaled near Castell's hair. Your hair smells so good, and your skin, it's so soft, too. The rest of the women quickly gathered around Castell and began examining her. There was no way of mistaking it. Her entire body was emanating a natural, lingering fragrance that simply couldn't be achieved by any perfume. It wasn't as if she had applied something to her skin, but rather as if her skin and hair themselves were the ones that smelled good. Ladies, mind your manners. The madam with the pearl necklace stopped the ladies from crowding around Castell too much. Now, are you certain that you achieved this scent through nothing but soap? She asked after turning back to Castell. Castell nodded her head obediently. Yes, madam. I only use soap to clean my body and something called a shampoo to clean my hair after every shower, bath. The rest of the women at the table slowly returned to their seats, completely bewildered by the thought of smelling this good with nothing but soap. Can you tell us the name of this soap and shampoo? Or better yet, will you sell me some of this material? I am willing to buy at the price of 1 gold. Me too. I'll buy it for 1 gold as well. Reserve 2 for me. I want to buy 1 for my daughter as well. Before sundown, Castell rushed back to the Vanderbilt mansion and immediately knocked on the young master's door. Castell, what's wrong? The moment she entered his room, she immediately recounted everything that had happened to her in the tea establishment. I'm telling you, young master, your product will certainly be devoured by a lot of women if you sell it at the market. Those women didn't hesitate to offer gold just for a chase to buy it. Michael was intrigued. If a simple soap and shampoo were enough to make the wealthy women of Kingsbridge clamor for buying it at 1 gold apiece, then perhaps it might be a good idea to start selling them at the market. Even though he would inherit the riches of the Vanderbilt family in the future, it wouldn't be a bad idea to get some money by himself. If he continued to rely on the Vanderbilt family's money, he would have to ask his mother for money each time he needed to buy materials for his experiments. But if he had made his own fortune, he could keep his projects a secret. Michael discovered that a single gold coin was equivalent to 1,000 silver coins, and each silver coin was worth 1,000 bronze coins. For context, maids like Castell and Beretta earned about 1 gold coin per month, which was considered a very generous salary in this world. Most people lived only on silver and bronze coins, so even possessing a single gold coin could be considered very rich. The best part about this was that the ingredients needed to produce the soap only cost a few hundred bronze coins. The profit margins were tremendous. I see. Thank you for telling me. If I were to sell this at the market, would you be the one to deliver the goods? Michael asked. Castell's eyes lit up at Michael's request. Of course, young master. It would be my honor. As long as we sell the soap to those madams, then I'm sure its reputation would spread like wildfire. Michael nodded. Castell described those women as the type of people who liked to flaunt their wealth. Once others started noticing that they were using his soap, many people would immediately envy them. In this world, those madams were like the early version of influencers back in his original world. Take some of the other maids with you and buy some more ingredients for the soap. Oh, and buy some more exotic flowers and oils as well, he instructed. If he was going to market his soap, Michael decided that he might as well offer different variations of the soap and shampoo. After all, not everyone liked the floral scent. Castell nodded eagerly and walked out of Michael's room with passion burning in her eyes. Now that he was all alone in his room, Michael turned his attention to a single piece of gear in his hands. Using his 2-star spell, Metal Bend, the smallest gear he could create was still about the size of an adult's palm and was far too big to create the wristwatches and pocket watches he envisioned. I guess I'll just have to settle with a big clock for now. Chat JK1, can you explain to me in detail how the early version of a mechanical clock worked? Certainly. Mechanical clocks operate using a combination of gears and weights to maintain a consistent movement, which allows it to keep the time accurate. Michael lay back on his bed as the information flooded his brain. The mechanical knowledge needed for the creation of a clock was far too complicated than he had anticipated and was too intricate for him to learn in an instant. He spent the entire night processing the information until finally he understood the concept with the same mastery as an engineer. He was so excited about this project that he almost couldn't sleep. To tire himself out, Michael meditated and pushed his mana gathering beyond his usual limits. The strain eventually wore him down, finally letting him sleep. All this time, even as he pursued his projects, he never slacked off on growing the mana stones within his body. Right now, the 4 main elemental rocks near his abdomen had grown to the size of small acorns. He estimated that the amount of mana stored in those small rocks was enough to allow him to cast 1-star spells continuously for 10 minutes without getting tired. Chat JK1, can you tell me how my mana compares to other mages? I'm sorry, I lack insufficient data to provide an accurate comparison. This was one of the downsides of keeping his magic a secret. He didn't have any tutor to guide him about the basics of magic. Since he wasn't supposed to know magic, he wasn't supposed to ask questions about them. This left him with a very shallow understanding of magic and how it truly worked. He wanted to know a lot more. He wanted to learn other spells. He wanted to know if there were elements present other than the 4 main ones, and he wanted to know the difference between the star ratings of the spells. I'll have to reveal my magic abilities to my parents at some point. When they return, I'll tell the truth and say that I created the plumbing system using my magic. His motto for doing this was so that he could justify learning about magic more properly. Knowing his father, he would waste no time and immediately order a tutor to teach him everything he needed to know. The next day, Michael began working on creating the first components of his clock project. Since the gears needed extreme precision, he couldn't afford to rush it. One mistake and the entire clock would be useless. In the meantime, he assigned several maids to help him create the soap and shampoo he was going to sell to the market. Of course, he immediately followed the modern methods, setting up a primitive version of a factory. One group of maids was in charge of mixing the main ingredients by turning them into a fine powder. Another group was in charge of mixing those with water. Then he also created more molds for the soap, where a third group of maids carefully poured the mixture into molds to shape the soap into perfect rectangles. The maids were eager to take part in this project, especially after Michael promised them that they could take their own supply of soap and shampoo at the end of the day. And even though Michael said that he would offer them some coins as compensation for their work, The maids immediately refused. "There's no need, young master," one of them insisted. "In the first place, we are hired to help you with everything in your life. And we are still incredibly thankful for the plumbing system you gave us. It has changed our lives. It is an honor for us to do this work." "Let them do it, young master," Beretta advised. "You don't know how grateful the maids are for your inventions. If you pay them, you'd be taking away their chance to show their gratitude." Michael was incredibly moved by their devotion, but he didn't like the idea of unpaid labor. He lived in a world where proper work deserved to be compensated. So, if they weren't going to accept money, Michael would simply shower them with more modern inventions for their convenience in the future. Days passed, and both the maids and butlers worked hard every day. After finishing their chores and tasks at the mansion early in the day, they would immediately head to the backyard and continue producing rows upon rows of soap and shampoo. Meanwhile, Michael was focused on constructing his clock project. The hardest part was already over, with most of the gears and mechanisms already produced in his project room. Now, all that he needed to do were a few final adjustments before he could at last begin assembling it all together. After 2 more days, he finally made a very rudimentary version of a Big Ben clock. Standing as tall as a wooden cabinet, it featured a simple round face at the very center. And even though the hour and minute hands of the clock were just thin rods of metal and weren't particularly elegant, they served their purpose properly. As long as no one looks inside, it looks decent, Michael thought, consoling himself. Since he wasn't a master craftsman just yet, he could only brute force his way into completing the project. If one looked at the inside of the block, one would see a chaotic mess of gears and pulley ropes jammed inside without any care for elegance. But, of course, he had made sure that all the mechanisms worked as intended. Hopefully. If it works, then I think it doesn't matter how it looks. The good thing about this clock was that it didn't have any power source. The bad thing was that he needed to wind up the crank every day, which would slowly lower the weight inside and make the clock's hands move and act like a proper clock. Michael walked to the side and started to wind up the clock by rotating the crank he had installed. Ding! A satisfying sound resonated from within while Michael felt the crank tighten, making it harder for him to turn the lever more, signifying that it had reached its limit. This was the moment of truth. Michael let go of the crank, and finally, tick-tock, tick-tock! A steady, rhythmic sound echoed in the clock as the hands began to tick down every second. It worked! A wave of satisfaction gushed in Michael's heart. It had been a challenge to create it, but it was worth it. "Young master, what is that?" Michael didn't know it, but there was already a crowd of maids and butlers gathered behind him. Their eyes burned with an intense curiosity as they looked at the giant cabinet that rang out with a rhythmic tick-tock sound. "Listen up, everyone. This is called a clock. It is divided into 12 parts, with each section representing an hour." Michael then went into a very long lecture about how clocks worked, but as expected, it was hard for people who had never seen a clock before to understand it. Heck, even people in his previous world had trouble reading a clock, even though they had known it all their lives. If this hand moves to the next line, it is equivalent to how long a candle lasts. The moment he equated it to candles, which was how people in this world measure time, they quickly understood the concept. "I see, young master." "Oh, another invention from the young master. He's too smart." Unfortunately, they didn't know how useful a clock was yet. After all, they never had to keep track of their time in their daily lives. But that was about to change. So, from now on, I hereby enforce all of you to only work 8 hours a day and not a second more. His words were immediately met with confusion. They didn't understand why he would impose such strict rules when doing more work, which would result in the production of more soaps, which would lead to a better profit. Wasn't that the goal? Michael could have asked them to work all night long to create the soaps, and they would have done so without a question. They were, after all, in his family's employ. But here he was, asking them to barely work half a day. "Young master," why, the maids asked. "Are you planning to let some of us go?" They were so used to working long hours and working every second of every day that they thought it was normal. But in Michael's world, everyone found out that working too much led to disastrous consequences. People must have a healthy balance of work and life, to truly live the way humans are supposed to live. They weren't slaves, after all. Although Michael could have treated them that way and earn a lot of money in the process, he was not going to be one of such people. As for why, well, Michael had one simple reason. If I were put in your place, I wouldn't want to work all day long. That's it. Michael's words, along with the unshakable honesty of a child, struck a deep chord in their hearts. The staff of the Vanderbilt mansion felt warmth bloom in their chests. How could they have been so lucky as to serve the only young master who saw them not just as maids and butlers, but also as humans? Some of them wiped the tears welling in their eyes and chuckled. Young master, we hope you stay like this even in the future. This just makes me want to work even harder. Yeah, let's create more soaps and keep the young master as wealthy as possible. I will do it all night, even if I have to. The maids and butlers cheered and immediately went over to their workstations to create more soaps. Michael shook his head in disappointment and let out a deep sigh. They had completely missed his point. Perhaps the reason they want to keep working is that they have nothing better to do. Maybe I should give them something to look forward to after a long day of hard work. Sitting on his bed, he cycled through his ideas. There were a lot of leisure activities in his previous life, but some of them required advanced technology. If I were them, what would I want to do? Then, an idea hit him. He almost couldn't believe that he hadn't thought about it till now. What were the usual pastimes and relaxation spots he usually saw in anime and television? Hot springs. The next day, Michael set to work on his hot springs idea. It didn't need to be extremely complicated. He just needed a large pool with a compartment at the bottom for the firewood, where the flames would heat the water to a comfortable temperature. It was unfortunate that his mansion wasn't anywhere close to a volcano, which would have made it easier to get water for the hot springs. Still, a man-made hot spring would do just fine. He asked ChatJK1 to find an appropriate spot near the house to install the hot springs, and his AI assistant directed him to a flat area by the river. For the design, Michael decided to take inspiration from the Romans, who used hot air and smoke to heat the flooring and water of their caldaria, their bathhouses. He started by laying a foundation at the bottom, creating a base filled with tiny pillars where the smoke and fire would spread. Above those pillars, he would place the actual flooring of the bathhouse. Using the 2-star spell, Boulder Carve, Michael transformed large chunks of rock on the ground into the needed pillars and flooring for the bathhouse. Boulder Carve, Earth Element. This magic allows the user to chip and carve out pieces of stone from a large boulder. He used this spell with a combination of a very useful 1-star spell, Stone Mend, which allowed him to seamlessly connect the stones without the need for cement. Stone Mend, Earth Element. This magic allows the user to combine similar earth materials into one piece as if they were connected from start. Since it was such a massive project, Michael could no longer keep his magic powers a secret. The maids stood in awe as they witnessed while reality started to shift and bend, beginning from Michael's hands and slowly manifesting into a glowing green aura around his body. They gasped, unable to believe that a 5-year-old boy was effortlessly able to lift a boulder larger than a bear by only using his magic. The young master, he's casting magic. I shouldn't be surprised, but he's really using earth magic. And that's no easy spell either. It's a 2-star difficulty magic. Some of the less knowledgeable maids tilted their heads. Is it really surprising for the young master to be good at magic? Most geniuses learn magic at the age of 5 as well. The more knowledgeable butlers looked at the young maid and grimaced. Yes, in terms of geniuses, it isn't that surprising, but the young master's different. How, she asked. Have you ever seen a magic tutor come to this mansion? Or have you ever seen Madam teaching the young master earth magic? Once the elderly butler pointed it out, and only then did a lot of the younger maids finally realized just how much of a monstrously genius their young master was. All the spells he was casting right now were self-learned. Nobody taught him anything. This meant that Michael had picked up those spells either through his observation or intuition, both of which were a feat only the talented and monstrous prodigies in history were capable of accomplishing. Also, how long have we been watching him cast those spells? Almost an hour? Yet, he's barely broken a sweat. How big is his mana capacity? Sir and Madam got really lucky with their only son. Not only is he a genius craftsman in the making, but he also has the potential to become a powerful wizard. Madam will be overjoyed once she learns about this. Her son is a natural genius at earth magic. Of course, they wouldn't know for some time that Michael wasn't only proficient with earth magic, but in all four main elemental mana. But that's a story for another time. ________. After a couple more days of hard work, the open bathhouse was finally complete. Compared to the bathhouses of his past life, it was quite big. But in terms of his current mansion, it was nothing more than a small puddle. He had divided the pool into two sections, one for men and one for women. At the end of the workday, Michael gathered all the maids and butlers at the entrance of his newly built hot springs. Even when they stood outside, they could feel the warmth radiating from its entrance. "Young master, what have you created this time?" Beretta asked, curiosity laced in her voice. Michael grabbed a bundle of firewood and tossed it towards the opening of the bathhouse's underground chamber, fueling the fire further. "This is a hot spring," he explained. "After working hard all day, you can come here to relax and immerse yourself in hot water. Trust me, it's incredibly invigorating." The idea of bathing in hot water after working all day long seemed like the perfect idea to relax. "This looks amazing. I can't wait. You've truly outdone yourself this time, young master. I swear, the steam alone is making my face feel younger." Everyone walked into the bathhouse, their faces filled with curiosity and excitement. Michael directed the butlers to the right side, while the maids were led to the left. "You take off your clothes here, then grab a towel and rinse yourselves." As soon as they got the instructions of what they had to do, the maids and butlers immediately rushed toward the hot springs. And just as Michael was about to go to the men's bath, a few maids pulled him back. "Young master, where are you going?" Going to take a bath." The young maid shook her head. "With those burly men?" "No, young master. You'll come with us." Michael blinked at the smiling young maids, feeling his cheeks heat up. All right. He was 5 years old now, which meant that people were treating him as nothing more than a precious, innocent little child. "Come bath with us. We'll wash your back." Michael instinctively started to back away. No thanks." Most of the maids were young and only about 20 years old. Compared to his age when he died in his previous world, they were the ones to be considered as babies. "Oh, please, young master. We used to bathe you when you were just a wee little child before. Don't be shy." Before he could protest, the group of clueless maids dragged Michael to the women's bath. "It's fine, this is fine, right? I'm only 5 years old. If I don't look, it's okay, right, ChatJK1? The sounds of excited giggling and splashing of water echoed through the hot spring. It sounded like the maids were having the time of their lives, having a lot of fun and relaxing in the rejuvenating hot water. Michael wouldn't know, of course. He was sitting on the edge of the pool, with both hands firmly covering his eyes. "Young master, come join us," they teased. But the adorable young master simply shook his head. From their perspective, he just looked like an embarrassed little boy. "The young master is so cute." Michael gritted his teeth, forcing his mind to stay calm. He had to use all his willpower to suppress his inner manly desires. But these maids weren't making it easy. "My skin is so smooth now. Look, touch me." "Kia, don't touch me there." "Hee. I never knew you were so blessed with those huge." "Shush. You want to talk to?" "I can't believe you're even able to sit with that big behind." A few hours later, everyone stepped out of the hot springs wearing a robe around their bodies. The expressions on their faces were almost otherworldly, as if they had just experienced nirvana. Never before had they felt so relaxed and fresh in their life. "Young master, the milk you requested is here," a butler announced, unloading a large barrel from the carriage. Of course, one of the essential things to do after relaxing in the hot springs was to drink milk. Drinking milk would help replenish all the fluids they had shed due to the bath's hot temperatures. He even demonstrated them the proper stance, one hand holding the milk and the other resting on their waist before taking a sip. It's so good I might melt." So this is what relaxing feels like. There was nothing but praise for the hot springs. These maids and butlers had started working ever since they were a child, which meant that they had never experienced anything like this before. It was as if they had become 10 years younger. Their cheeks were smooth and rosy, and for the first time in a long while, they felt truly young. Michael felt satisfied while he leaned on his chair, watching them talk and enjoy the night under the starry sky. He had shown them how comfortable life could be, and he didn't want to stop. He hoped that he could show it to the rest of the world as well. The next morning, the clock bell rang, signaling the start of a new day. Rejuvenated from their baths, the maids and butlers woke up early and got to work. All the relaxation from yesterday had re-energized their bodies to the fullest, allowing them to work with 200% efficiency. They pumped up water to refill the tank, cleaned the mansion spotlessly, changed the sheets, and tended to the garden in record time. The bell for noon hadn't even rang yet, but every chore in the mansion had already been completed. Next, they immediately went to work on the soaps, carefully taking the dried molds out of the sun and into the mansion for safekeeping. By helping the young master with the soap and shampoo business, they were hoping that they could repay all the kindness he'd given them. Finally, after a few days of work, Michael had finally built up a good stock of soaps and shampoo, each with different variations. The mansion was now filled with crates stacked high with soap bars, and on top of those were vials of shampoo lined up in the hundreds. "I'll be delivering the products to the madams," Castell announced. Some of the madams who had witnessed firsthand how soap and shampoo could be even more fragrant than some perfume had already placed pre-orders. Those few people had already ordered an entire box of soap and shampoo for themselves, and thanks to the word-of-mouth gossip, there were some madams who had personally approached Castell, eager to buy one for themselves. "That's great," Michael said. The butlers loaded the crates onto the carriage, ready to be delivered personally by Castell. But just before she departed for the next town, she turned back to Michael with an important question. "Young master, if they ask me where I got these from, what should I tell them?" The maids and butlers had been careful to keep the young master and his inventions a secret. Even when they wrote to his parents, they had lied, claiming that nothing eventful happened in the mansion during their trip. This was a crime worthy of termination, but for the young master, it was worth it. If I want to keep this business a secret from my parents, then I need to go under a different name, or better yet, why not a company? "Tell them that you got these from a company called Reborn." Castell repeated the name to herself and nodded. "Reborn, Reborn soap, Reborn shampoo. That is a very good name for a company, young master. After all, any lady who uses your product will feel like she has been reborn." Oh yeah, she didn't know that Michael only thought about that name because he was literally reborn from another world. ___________. Castell personally traveled through the town and delivered the boxes of soap and shampoo to the mansions of their very first customers. The madams and their daughters excitedly opened their packages of goodies and smelled them for themselves. And just as it was promised by Castell, its fragrances were amazing. They didn't even waste any more time and ordered their own maids to prepare a bath for them. They wanted to experience this soap and shampoo at that very instant. "My apologies," the madam's butler said as he handed Castell a heavy purse brimming with gold coins. The madam had been quite impatient waiting for these soaps and shampoo. "She's been moody as of late. This is the promised compensation, along with a couple extra for your troubles." Just from weight alone, Castell knew that it was far more than what she expected. And just when she was about to leave, the butler waved down her carriage. "Ahem. If we were to acquire more of these goods, can we count on you to deliver them?" Castell couldn't help but smile. "Yes, please." "Oh, and one more thing," the butler added. "Can I know the name of the man I have to thank for making my madam so happy?" As much as Castell wanted to brag about her young master, she kept her quiet. "These are brought to you by a company called Reborn. Unfortunately, that is all I can say." Reborn, very well. That night, Castell finished all her deliveries, and the reactions from each of the customers were as ecstatic as the first madam. ___________. By the next day, their husbands had begun to notice the difference. Their wives smelled incredible, earning the madams a lot of love and attention. Not only that, As they paraded themselves throughout the town, all the other ladies couldn't help but be envious of how their skin was glowing or how their hair was so smooth and fragrant. Of course, as those madams started bragging, the name Reborn soap and Reborn shampoo etched itself deeper in the minds of the rich people in Kingsbridge. Soon, the Reborn soap and Reborn shampoo became the must-have luxury soap and shampoo brand in the market. Since the price of a pair of soap and shampoo was 1 gold coin, while the cost of all the ingredients needed to create those pair of items only cost around 500 bronze coins, the profit he gained from selling a pair of them was an astounding 999,500 bronze coins. It was almost absurd to think about. That was the profit from just a pair of soap and shampoo. All the crates Castell delivered contained about 100 pairs. This meant that each box was worth 100 gold coins. In total, Michael was now looking at 1,000 gold coins all spread around in his bedroom. Hey ChatJK1, if you were to convert all these gold coins into US dollar, how much would it be? The value of the gold coins in your possession varies due to the difference in purity as well as the condition of each coin. However, based on estimation, each of these coins is roughly worth around 1,000 US dollars. Since you have 1,000 gold coins, the money in your possession is worth 1 million US dollars. Michael took a deep breath. Someone having that kind of money was considered very rich in many third-world countries. And since it took about a week to create all the soap and shampoo they sold yesterday, that would mean that Michael could earn about 4 million US dollars worth of gold coins every month. And if he did it for a year, that would net him just shy away from $50 million. Back in his previous world, a monthly salary of $10,000 would have been more than enough to live relatively comfortably. But if he earned $4 million a month, he would join the elite class of the top 0.01% of people in first-world countries like America. Earning this much felt like cheating. All the work was being done by the maids and the butlers, while he just lounged around the mansion without doing anything. I guess I'll just store this money for now. Michael wasn't short on funds for now. If he ever needed to buy something without wanting his parents to know of it, he could be assured that he had more than enough to buy it by himself. ________. A few more days passed, and Castella came running into Michael's door with the biggest smile on her face. Young master. Young master. Michael groggily opened the door and rubbed his eyes. The morning bell from the clock hadn't even rung yet, but Castell looked like she had been up for hours already. What is it? The soap and shampoo is becoming very popular, young master. All the gossip I've heard from the other maids in town is all about the Reborn soap and shampoo. That's good, Michael said, yawning as he stretched his body. It was probably because he was born into the richest family in the world, but the idea of earning even more money didn't really excite Michael that much. Having 1,000 gold coins seemed sufficient enough. After all, the things he truly wanted to buy hadn't been invented yet. If he wanted them, he would have to make it himself, so he didn't need to buy anything from the markets in this world. Wait, why am I thinking that this world is just a medieval world? I completely forgot. This is a world of magic too. He leaned closer to Castell and whispered, I need something. Can you buy it for me in secret? Castell picked up on Michael's clues and entered his bedroom for a private conversation. Is there anything specific you want, young master? Michael nodded. First of all, I can trust you, right? Castell nodded and thumped her first against her chest. Of course, young master, she said, sounding a little bit offended that he didn't think she was completely loyal to him at this point. Clearing his throat, Michael raised his hand and summoned a fire from the tip of his finger. This was one of the very first spells he learned, the 1-star, Ember. I can use magic, he said. Castell's eyes widened. Fire. Young master, you are adept with the fire element as well. She wasn't surprised to find that Michael could use magic. She was surprised that he could cast a spell other than the earth element. Is there something wrong with that? He asked, completely oblivious. Young master, having mastery of dual elements is considered to be incredibly rare. Michael looked at Castell, trying to make sure that she was serious. He thought it wasn't anything special. After all, a fire spell wasn't the only thing he could use. He raised his other hand and summoned fire on the tip of his index finger, a small rock on the other, and a blob of water on the next. Then a gust of wind rotated the three elements in a constant movement around his hand, with enough mastery to weave them around his fingers. Castell nearly tumbled backwards, her entire body shaking as she saw this. Four elements, that's supposed to be impossible, young master. I can't even call you a genius anymore. Michael blinked. So, this is not normal? Of course it's not. Castell screamed. Michael quickly learned that he had to be a little more careful about revealing his quadruple mastery over the elements. I think it's best if you only show your mastery over the earth element, T for now, young master. That can at least be explained as an inheritance from your mother's talent, Castell advised. It was a very good suggestion. _________. A few minutes later, after Michael fetched her a cup of water, Castell finally calmed down. That was a shock, young master. Sorry about that. She took a big gulp and then turned to him. By the way, what was it that you wanted me to buy? Michael handed her a pouch containing 1,000 gold coins. I want you to buy any book that describes magic, mana, and spells. Specifically, I want anything that can teach me how to cast other spells. Castell took another big gulp of water. Books? Do you mean magic scrolls, young master? What is that? A magic scroll is something that mages use to learn different spells. Most of them can be bought at the local magic tower. Magic towers, you say? Tell me more. A magic tower is a tall spire where veteran mages and aspiring wizards gather. The upper floors are restricted, but they have their first floor open to the public for business. There, they sell books and scrolls, and one could even hire a mage through them. Michael's curiosity piqued. He imagined the tower as something he had read about in fantasy books, with moving paintings, floating floors, and secret chambers brimming with arcane knowledge. Have you been there before? He asked Castell. Once, when I was young, I was fortunate enough to chance upon one of the mages demonstrating his magic spells to the public. It was breathtaking. If I had the aptitude, I would have wanted to become a mage myself, Castell said wistfully. Michael suddenly looked up at Castell. The mage showed off his spells? Is that a normal occurrence? Castell nodded. Not too often, though, mostly on special occasions. The Guild of Arcana organizes these performances to assure the local people that they are safe under their banner. The Guild of Arcana? Oh, the Guild of Arcana is a nationwide organization in charge of the Magic Tower. Castell went on to talk more about the Magic Tower, but Michael was barely listening. He was too enchanted by the fact that he could potentially witness a veteran mage perform one of his spells in person. After all, his ChatJK-1 could analyze the spell's theory and allow him to cast it himself. The prospect was very promising, one that even tempted Michael to get out of the mansion for the first time and visit the Magic Tower. Kingsbridge Town was only about 2 to 3 hours by carriage away from here, so it wasn't that far. Young master, are you listening? Michael trusted his ChatJK-1 to listen to him. He didn't have to pay attention. Can you summarize what she said? The Magic Tower is managed by the Guild of Arcana. They are a nationwide organization in charge of maintaining peace among mages and the public. He simply repeated ChatJK-1's answer, impressing Castell with his listening skills. Do you think I can go to the Magic Tower? Castell was taken aback by his question and immediately shook her head. I'm sorry, young master. For a person of your stature, it would cause far too much commotion. Your mother and father will be immediately notified once you leave the estate and will immediately return home and fire us all for allowing this to happen. Michael sighed. He kept forgetting that he was the youngest son of the Vanderbilt name, the richest family in the entire world. Even in his past life, the children of celebrities would immediately be hounded by attention. This world didn't look any different. Fine. There's no rush. He finally gave up on the idea. That is the best course of action, young master. Besides, there's no doubt that your mother and father would ask you to visit the Magic Tower once they find out about your magic aptitude. Michael nodded to himself. That might actually work in his favor. If he went to the Magic Tower with his parents, the mages would undoubtedly seek to curry favor with them. And in doing so, Michael could take advantage of them by making them perform spells in front of him. They would see it as nothing more than a child getting curious about magic. but Michael could secretly learn their spells for himself. Underscore, 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 underscore. Another day passed, and Michael was starting to grow bored. Ever since Castell mentioned the magic tower, he couldn't get his mind off it. My mind is too active. Is there something else I can do to keep me mentally occupied? Just then, a thought struck him. In his previous life, before he died, he had been addicted to an online game he played on his computer. That game had become quite popular during that time despite having existed for over 1,000 years before the modern age. It wasn't a role-playing game, nor was it multiplayer. In fact, it was much more simple than that. It was online chess. Since he used to spend all day in the confines of his own home, he never had the chance to play the physical version of chess. But now he had the chance to. Michael didn't waste time and sprang from his bed and rushed past the maids who were busy washing dishes before giving them a curt greeting and then headed outside. Then he made his way into the forest to find a big tree with a thick stump. Upon finding a suitable one, he used the one-star spell Splinter Wood to chop down the tree, hacking it down one slice at a time. After a while, when the tree finally fell, Michael ran his fingers over the rough surface and envisioned a perfect 8x8 grid, the foundation for a chessboard. Underscore, 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 underscore. A couple of hours later, Michael emerged from the forest carrying a polished, thin rectangle board and a small bag filled with a couple of wooden statue-like pieces. By then, the clock bell had already rung, signaling the end of everyone's work, and it was time for relaxation. Most of the maids immediately rushed to the hot springs, but a few of the butlers, too tired to bathe in hot water every day, chose to spend their relaxation time by doing nothing but lounging on their chairs. Thump! The butlers were jolted awake as Michael plopped down the chessboard onto the table. "Young master, you're here." They greeted him, straightening up. Michael sat opposite the board and looked at the butlers with a mischievous grin spreading across his face. "Let's play a game," Michael said in a weird voice while he began arranging the chess pieces on the board. The butlers exchanged glances. "What is that?" they asked in unison. Michael smirked. "This is chess, an intellectual game for distinguished gentlemen. If any one of you can beat me, then I will give you 100 gold coins." The butlers perked up upon hearing the juicy sound of a bag of coins being put on the table. "Is that real, young master?" one of the butlers asked. Michael leaned back. "Only if you beat me, of course." At that, a veteran butler with neatly combed white hair and a waxed mustache stepped forward, pushing the younger ones away, and faced the young master. "Ho, ho, ho! An intellectual and distinguished gentleman, you say? Then allow me, young master." Michael's grin widened. "I knew you'd find this interesting, Sebastian. Good. This game is called chess, and here are the rules." As Michael began explaining, the butlers listened intently, their faces slowly furrowing as they heard how simple the game looked. Just capture the king? It was easy, they thought. Hours passed. When the maids finally returned from their relaxation in the hot springs, they were met with an unusual sight. All the butlers huddled over a single table, deep in discussion. Not only that, they were quite noisy too. "No, the best move would be to move the horse there." "Ah, but he'll be captured by the bishop if you do that." "You're all missing the point. The young master is just one move away from cornering the king." Michael calmly picked up the crude version of the queen to capture his opponent's pawn, cornering Sebastian's king, and leaving him with no other option than to surrender. "Checkmate," Michael said with a proud smile on his face. Sebastian didn't have the cool and dignified aura he usually had. The man's once pristine white hair was a mess since he kept on scratching his head every time Michael attacked him with his versatile queen piece. Even his signature mustache looked like it had lost all its wax and ended up sagging to his neck, as if in defeat. I surrender, young master." Applause erupted from the rest of the butlers as they acknowledged the young master's undeniable victory. 20 games. Sebastian was thoroughly beaten through in these 20 games, dispelling any of their illusions that this chess game was as easy as they thought. Even though they were all proud of their intellect because of their training as butlers for years, they couldn't seem to compare to the young master himself. In the end, the rest of the butlers were convening with Sebastian about the next smartest move, but even with their combined help, They couldn't capture the queen that had decimated their pieces. Michael chuckled, crossing his arms. Don't feel bad. I had a head start against you, after all. Michael had peaked at around 1500 in online chess, which was considered quite a good rating for an amateur. He didn't even need to use ChatJK1 to figure out the moves to defeat Sebastian. There were a lot of errors with your endgame positioning. Would you like me to highlight your mistakes and suggest the best moves in those situations? Not right now. These guys are way too weak to be my opponent right now. Maybe I'll need your help once they get better. Probably in 100 years. Ha ha. Based on my analysis, Sebastian will be able to defeat you in chess within 2 years. He has demonstrated great talent in it. What? Michael's pride was a little bit wounded when he heard that. After all, he spent more than 5 years playing online chess consistently to reach the rating he stood right now. Young master, just one more game. Sebastian begged. Oh, look at that. The bell's ringing. Guess I gotta go to bed. See ya, Michael said, perking his ears to the non-existent sound in the air. The butlers continued to play amongst themselves until the night. But even as Sebastian closed his eyes and tried to sleep, he couldn't help but see the chessboard in his dreams, with the young master opposite him. But even in his sleep, he couldn't beat the young master. The next day, Michael created more chessboards and pieces to satisfy the cravings of the butlers' growing obsession. As soon as the bell rang and their workday ended, they quickly went over to the tables, eager to test their chess skills against each other. It was as if a frenzy had appeared in the mansion, infecting all the intellectuals who sought to test their mettle against others. Sebastian quickly proved himself to be a head above the others, since he was now the one who went undefeated against all the other butlers without losing even once. But as they continued playing, the collective skill level among the butlers rose higher and higher. The friendly rivalry among them allowed them to learn from each other, with the winner teaching the loser about how to get better and learn from their mistakes. It wasn't just them who got addicted. Even some of the maids got acquainted with the game. Castell, in particular, was one such person. The woman quickly fell in love with the game and the complexity within its moves and strategies. The mansion soon echoed with sounds of chess pieces clicking against the boards, as well as the occasional yelps and gasps as they lost their crucial pieces because of a mistake or a clever move. Days passed, and finally, it was time to ship another batch of soaps and shampoo to their new, eagerly waiting customers. After the rich madams and their daughters showed off their new smell to their friends, it immediately sparked an intense desire to get one for themselves. But because the Reborn soap and shampoo weren't available to the market yet, it became some sort of a local legend within the community of wives and madams. This, in turn, pushed demand through the roof. Castell was already contacted by the madams whose friends wanted to buy loads and loads of their product. Thankfully, Michael had anticipated this and had already scaled the production of the soap and shampoo. Now, Castell was on her way to deliver the crates of the sought-after soap and shampoo to those new, eager customers. Oh my, I can even smell it from here, a wealthy woman exclaimed as Castell dragged the crate right to her doorstep. Of course, Castell replied with a confident smile. That is why Reborn soap and shampoo is so popular right now. Well, I consider myself very fortunate that I was one of the few who can purchase this item. Castell smiled. Would you like to come in for tea? The madam offered, clearly trying to curry favor with Castell. Oh, I wouldn't want to impose, madam. Please, it's no big deal. And there's still so much we have to talk about. Some of my friends have been wanting to buy a box for themselves as well. Maybe you can help them. Smelling the scent of gold, Castell finally accepted the invitation and went in for tea with the madam. Seated in the garden, the two sipped chamomile and nibbled on biscuits. Oh, a guest, a well-dressed man murmured, lounging in his chair. That's perhaps the most interesting thing that happened today. Please forgive my husband. He's been too bored lately, said the madam with an exasperated smile. But then, a spark of inspiration flickered in Castell's mind. She turned to the madam's husband and said, Bored, sir? Perhaps I might interest you in a little game called chess. And that would be checkmate, sir, Castell declared as she cornered the man's king with her bishop. The man, instead of being frustrated that he had lost the game, erupted with incredible excitement. This is exhilarating. There are so many possibilities in the moves that I can't help but try to think of more than 5 moves ahead. Castell laughed. She had been just like him when she first learned about chess. This game called chess, can I buy one for myself? I simply must tell my friends about it. They're going to have a blast. This was an unexpected turn of events. She had only brought her own chessboard because she would get bored whenever they traveled through the carriage. She would play by herself and try to improve her skills through imagination. When the Sir mentioned he was bored, she simply wanted to play a game of chess with him because she wanted to play it as well. She would have never imagined that it would lead to another possible source of business opportunity for the Reborn company. Very well, sir. I will ask my employer to provide you with chessboards. Underscore. Later that evening, Castell reported the encounter to Michael. I'm sure, why not? Very well, sir. How much should we sell a board set? 1 gold coin each? No, that's too low. How about 10 gold coins each? According to Castell, chess was an expensive item because Michael constructed each piece by himself, a process that took great effort and time from the young master himself. The maids and butlers couldn't do it because they didn't have the magic nor the craftsmanship required to carve the intricate statuettes for the chess pieces. In her opinion, a single board should be worth at least 100 gold coins. No, that's too expensive. We should sell it for around 100 bronze coins, Michael said, rubbing his chin. Bronze coins? Not gold coins, young master. Isn't that too cheap? Michael shook his head. What do you think will happen once we put the chessboard into the market and it costs around 1 gold coin? People would want to buy them. Castell answered. Michael nodded. Yes, but what if they can't afford it? What do you think would happen after that? Castell was stumped. They would save money to buy one. No. What would happen is that other people will produce their own chessboards at a much lower price. They will sell it and earn much more than us because there will be a lot of people who will buy it. That kind of practice was very normal in his previous world. Whenever a popular brand released a new product, cheap imitations would immediately swarm the market and would be sold at a much lower price. There's nothing special about a chessboard, Michael continued. It's just made of wood and a couple of pieces. Anyone can make that. It was only then that Castell realized Michael's words. No one would want to buy a chessboard from them at an extremely high price when they could just make one by themselves. I think I get it, young master. If we sell them a low price, a lot of people would still be able to afford them and buy them from us instead of others who will copy us. Michael was also thinking about one thing that this world didn't have: branding. Sometimes it was much better to build a strong brand rather than make immediate money. That was what increased the profits of companies in his previous world and transformed them into global giants. How much did we earn from the Reborn soap and shampoo delivery today? Michael asked. Castell gave him an even larger leather pouch than the last one. About 3,500 gold coins, young master. Michael weighed the pouch in his hands. That was worth $3,500,000 worth of gold coins in his hands. This was the most amount of money he had ever earned in his previous life. And to think he earned this in about a week. Michael's mind was blown away. But since he didn't have anything to do with this money right away, it was better to invest it in his company instead. Take this money and hire some wood craftsmen or mages to create the chessboards and pieces, Michael instructed as he pushed the leather pouch back into Castell's hands. Understood, young master. And before she left his room, Michael added one last thing. Oh, and introduced the game as Reborn Chess. We need people to know it's ours. The next day, Castell once again set off into Kingsbridge, but this time it was to deliver chessboards to the Sir's mansion. Upon her arrival, she found that the estate was already bustling with well-dressed gentlemen acquaintances, all eager to see the game he had raved about. Michael had created 10 chessboards for this shipment, but the next orders would be made by other craftsmen. Oh, here she is, gentlemen, the man announced proudly. She is the one who introduced me to this brilliant, sophisticated game. Castell was met with a lot of curious gazes from the men clad in gentlemen's suits. Judging from their stature alone, she could guess that they were the intellectual type. Greetings, sirs and madams. I am here to deliver the chess boards you ordered, she announced as she carefully laid down the board on the table. What say you we play a demonstration match to teach them the rules? The sir from before suggested. It would be my pleasure, Castell replied with a polite smile. After about an hour, the table was crowded with gentlemen rubbing their chins and adjusting their monocles, their eyes fixed on the board. They were intensely focused on the game, mumbling to themselves about which move they would have made if they were in a man's place. And once again, that is checkmate, sir. A collective gasp spread through the spectators. Only now did they notice that Castell's final move had completely conquered the chessboard. There was no move left for the king to run away to. Golly, oh my! Despite his loss, the gentleman sitting opposite to her beamed with delight. Do you see, gentlemen? This game is the perfect mental battle for men like us. It is as if we are generals barking orders to our armies. The rest of the men went silent. It wasn't until a few seconds later when one man with a monocle broke the ice. You shouldn't have moved your king to that place. You should have used your bishop to defend that last pawn, he exclaimed, lecturing the man. His words seemed to ignite a lively discussion amongst the gentlemen. You are completely wrong. The best move should have been. No. Clearly, he should have castled much earlier. Look at you spouting the wrong things. What he should have done is, actually, let me show you. Why don't we play a game right now? You can't. I'll be using the board next. Let's play a game to see who will use it next. You're on. The group of distinguished gentlemen quickly settled down once Castell presented them with 9 more boards to play with. With an almost frantic excitement, they quickly got engulfed in the frenzy, playing one chess game after the other with seemingly no intention of ever stopping. When one of them lost, the victor would brag and ridicule the loser, prompting the loser to become even more engulfed in trying to learn more about chess to finally win. And when they finally won, the euphoria they experienced was enough to get them addicted to the game and chase that feeling of victory once again. The ones who lost would also want to become better so that they wouldn't lose ever again. It was a vicious cycle, and all of it ended up benefiting the Reborn company. One of the men approached Castell. She noted that, unlike the others, he was the only man who didn't wear a gentleman's suit and instead wore a dark robe with intricate runes embroidered onto his chest. Would you be able to procure 100 more boards and pieces for us? He asked. Castell tilted her head. How many would you like exactly? 100. No, 1,000. At least 100 now and more later. Can you do it? Castell seemed to have underestimated how much the men had gotten addicted to chess. 100 would need at least 2 days, sir. The robed man nodded, anxiously nibbling his fingernails. Okay, as soon as possible. You need to deliver them to the magic tower in town. You're familiar with it, right? Castell nodded. And just as she thought, this robed man was a bona fide maid from the magic tower. She had guessed as much after seeing his peculiar attire. My friends at the tower will love this game. I'm sure of it. This is the perfect game for mages to exercise their intelligence. Castell could already imagine how pleased the young master would be to know that his invention was now spreading to the magic tower itself. By the way, what's the name of this game again? The game is called Reborn Chess. ________. More days passed, and something weird seemed to happen in Kingsbridge Town. All of a sudden, a new upstart company called Reborn had started to take over the gossip and leisure time of almost everyone in town. The ladies were all talking about nothing but the miraculous soap and shampoo that, according to the rumors, could transform even an ugly toad into a radiant beauty after just one wash. Every woman in the town wanted to bathe with Reborn soap and shampoo. That was the consensus within the women's community, which meant that the other soap manufacturers and companies were struggling to keep up. What do you mean you don't know how to make it? It's just soap. If they can do it, we can do it too, snapped one of the major soap manufacturers to his employees. It's impossible, sir. Their formula is completely different from what we and everyone else make. I don't even know if they use the same ingredients as us. The boss of the soap manufacturing company had no choice but to bury his head in his desk. No matter how hard they tried, they simply couldn't replicate the scent and lather of the Reborn soap. Reborn. Where did this unknown company even come from? The man cursed. To clear his head, the man decided to walk to his factory where most of his soap was produced. But instead of seeing hard-working men stirring massive cauldrons and stoking the fires, he found them all huddled around a single table, concentrated on something other than work. He should have captured the pawn. Yes. Now, his rook is in trouble. Frowning, the boss walked over to the table and saw two of his veteran employees engaged in some strange game of wooden pieces on a wooden board. He was just about to reprimand his workers about lazing off work. But after watching the game for a few minutes, he, too, was intrigued by its complexity. He wanted to play it, too. That game looks fun, he admitted. What's it called? The workers didn't even turn to look back at him and answered. It's called Reborn chess. Reborn. Sigh. The man muttered the name under his breath before he simply passed out. Underscore. The business is going well, young master, Castell reported. We've been contacted by a lot of wealthy parties looking to buy soap and shampoo by the crates. There are also some merchants who wish to purchase our products, hoping to resell them in other towns. As for Reborn chess, it's spreading quite rapidly as well. Our biggest customer right now is the Magic Tower, with most mages buying one set for themselves. I even had to employ about 50 craftsmen from different towns just to accommodate the demand. Michael sat on his bed and listened to Castell's report about his secret company, Reborn. He hadn't expected it to grow this fast. The demand for his products had far exceeded what they could even currently produce. Case in point, Michael knew that he couldn't produce more soap and shampoo every day. He needed more people, a lot more, to produce the cleaning products that everyone had been clamoring for. To solve this problem, Michael knew that he had to hire some more help. I've heard that once someone tries our product, they never go back to their old soap. Isn't this great, young master? Castell added with a grin. But when Michael heard that, he frowned. What about the other soap manufacturing businesses? What's happening with them? They're not doing great, she answered, confused as to why Michael wasn't happy with this outcome. That's not good, Michael muttered. I'm sorry, but isn't this supposed to be great for the company? She asked hesitantly. With less competition, we will have more customers in the future. Michael let out a sigh. But that also means we're ruining their business and their families' livelihoods. If they can't sell soap, they won't survive. I didn't start this business to earn money. I did this so that everyone's life can be more comfortable. Hearing his words, Castell felt a warmth spread through her heart. Even though Michael had every reason to be a greedy and ruthless businessman, he still cared about others. Then what should we do, young master? The solution for this is simple. We buy them out. Instead of driving the local soap businesses into bankruptcy, Michael wanted to absorb them into his company. It was a win-win scenario for everyone. Because Reborn soap and shampoo became so popular, times were rough for anyone in the traditional soap production business. In a matter of days, their entire businesses collapsed. No one was buying their products anymore. Daddy, can you buy me a chessboard? Please, Daddy. A young boy tugged at his father's sleeves, eyes full of hope. The father was none other than the owner of the failing soap-making business. I'm sorry, son. Money's a little tight right now. How about we buy you a chessboard next year? He forced a smile, kneeling to rub the boy's hair. No, I want it right now. The boy cried before running off in tears. Seeing his child in tears, the man sighed, but there was nothing he could do other than let the boy sulk. Now that no one was buying their soaps, they weren't earning enough money to even keep the business afloat. All the money he saved up was being used to pay his workers a decent salary in these hard times. Knock, knock. Just then, a sudden knock at the door of his office pulled him from his thoughts. He quickly welcomed the visitor in, hoping that it was a potential customer. Quickly straightening up, he put on his best smile. Hello, what can I do for you? The door opened, and in walked a young woman, who gave a polite bow before speaking. Good morning, sir. I'm here as a representative of the Reborn Company. At the mention of the name, the man stiffened. He would have never thought that the very company responsible for his struggles had sent someone to his doorstep. His tone turned sharp. What do you want? Castell sat across from the man and slid a piece of paper onto his desk. The man ignored it, not even glancing at it, keeping his sharp gaze locked on her instead. Seeing his obvious hostility, Castell knew that she had to shift her tactics. Sir, Why do you own a soap business? Castell asked. Isn't it obvious? He scoffed. I wanted to earn money. Wanted. But thanks to your company, I can't even buy my son a chessboard for his birthday. My workers are struggling to eat. Without a word, Castell picked up the paper and showed it to the man, making sure that he finally paid attention to it. This is the formula for our soap, she said. Our young master wants you to have it. The man's eyes widened, and he quickly snatched the paper and parsed through the contents. His expression shifted from suspicion to disbelief. The instructions looked genuine, a detailed, step-by-step guide to creating Reborn soap. He couldn't believe it. His grip on the piece of paper tightened. Is this some sort of trick? What are you trying to pull? Castell shook her head. There are no tricks. If you want to take that piece of paper with you, then we will gladly give it to you. There are no other conditions. The man shot up from his chair and paced back and forth in his office. Why? He demanded. Why are you giving your competitor the biggest secret of your soaps? You could have kept it yourselves and drove us all out of business. Castell smiled, recalling the young master's words. The owner of the Reborn company doesn't want enemies, she said. He wants everyone to live comfortably. And if that means giving you the formula, then he is willing to do that. The man stopped in his tracks and looked at Castell to see if she was kidding. But she wasn't. She was serious. I don't know if I should laugh or commend him, the man said, rubbing his hair in frustration. They had made it extremely hard for him to hate the Reborn company. Sir, if you wouldn't mind me asking, can you tell me what was your best monthly profit from selling soap? The man was confused by her question. What? On a good day, what would you have considered a good profit before the Reborn soap took over the market? Castell reiterated. The man thought it over and gave out a generous estimate. About 100 gold a month, he said. Castell then reached into her pocket, pulled out a pouch, and plopped it over to the man's desk. He wouldn't mistake that clinking sound for anything else. Those were gold coins, a lot of them too. The Reborn company is willing to give you a chance, Castell said. If you come under the banner of our company, we are willing to give you 1,000 gold coins up front, plus a portion of sales every month if you produce Reborn products for us. The man gulped, his mind already lost in all the words Castell said. If you become a part of us, you will officially sell Reborn soap and shampoo. The man sank back into his chair. And what happens if I refuse? Will you take back the formula? No, that formula is yours to keep. You can sell that soap under a different name, and we will not disturb your business. However, let me remind you that our Reborn company is not just a single product. The leader of our company has a lot of other products and ideas in store. He has plans to make lotions, perfumes, and other such products. It's not even limited to just cleaning products. And as you may know, we are also the ones who introduced chess into the market. If you join us, you can have the opportunity to be a part of something much bigger. If the man was short-sighted, he would have just taken the formula and produced Reborn soap by himself and kept all the profits. But in the long term, he would stand to gain much higher profits if he allied himself with the Reborn company's greater success. After all, the future of this company was astronomical. Still, this was a big decision. You can take your time deliberating for now, Castell said. I'll be back later to hear your answer. Castell then walked back to the door and gave him another courteous bow before she left. The man remained in his seat, his head buried in his hands. His decision here could alter his and his family's fate for better or for worse. Just then, the door burst wide open. His son ran in, beaming with the biggest smile on his face while he carried a chessboard, one personally made by Michael. Castell had dropped it off as a gift. Thank you, Daddy. I love you. Before he could even react, his boy threw his arms around him for a big hug. The man's smile grew, with tears welling up in his eyes. At that moment, his decision became clear. He was going to accept their offer. I have good news, young master. Each and every soap business we approach has accepted our offer, Castell announced, bowing towards the young master as he lounged under the sun on the rooftop, looking utterly at ease. That's good. That's good, he replied lazily. Based on my estimates, our production of soap and shampoo has increased by nearly 2,000%. We can now create thousands of soaps and shampoos every day thanks to the infrastructure of the companies under our banner. They have already started to sell it to the market, and it's being sold out the minute it shows up in their wares. Peddlers have already started to sell it to other towns, and it's starting to catch on as well. Their demand is growing rapidly. There was admiration and excitement in Castell's voice. She would have never thought that giving away the secret formula for the soap would end up becoming such a massive boon for their company. She looked at the young master as if he had Midas hands, turning everything he touched to gold. Of course, Michael didn't think he was doing anything special. According to him, he was simply following the business practices of conglomerates back in his previous world. "How much did we earn?" Michael asked. Castell smiled and gestured towards the door. The two watched as a maid hauled a wooden chest up towards them. Judging from how much trouble she was having while pushing the thing, Michael knew that it was heavy. With great effort, the maid then pried the wooden chest open to reveal the thousands upon thousands of gleaming gold coins inside. Its luster reflected onto Michael's face, briefly turning his face yellow. Even after paying for all the expenses, our net profit still stands at about 15,000 gold coins. Michael tried his hardest to remain calm, but when he converted the gold to US dollars, he couldn't help but take a deep breath. 15,000 gold coins meant $15 million. That was what he earned in a single day. "I guess I'm rich." Underscore. Because of the increased production of Reborn soap and shampoo, the company's reputation skyrocketed to the moon. It was noted that people were showering and washing their hands a lot more often because of Reborn soap and shampoo, which in turn reduced the spread of disease and sickness by a great degree. In a matter of 2 months, Reborn Company had won over the hearts of everyone, whether they were male, female, old, or young. For women, their soaps became an essential luxury. And for men, their newly released board game became an obsession. In Kingsbridge Town, the Reborn Company became the hottest topic, dominating newspapers and gossip circles alike. Everyone was wondering where they came from and who was responsible for creating such amazing products. There were numerous speculations, ranging from the owner being a wizard from the future, a sage who lived in the mountains for 1,000 years, or even just a simple man whose genius knew no bounds. And despite almost ruining local soap businesses to the brink of bankruptcy, nobody seemed to resent the Reborn Company. Even the ruined soap companies spoke highly of them, praising Reborn for their generosity. This only deepened the mystery surrounding the upstart company. They were the talk of the town. Nearly every household in Kingsbridge knew about the Reborn Company and was using their products religiously. And soon, the trend spread to other neighboring towns and cities as well. It was only a matter of time before they completely carved a large portion of the market for themselves. But, of course, none of this went over the heads of the largest company in Kingsbridge. Underscore. Our survey indicates that the popularity of our company went down by at least 30% because of this Reborn business. Does anyone have any idea where these upstarts came from? Is this a ploy from our other rivals? No, they're feeling the same as us. A group of old, distinguished men in suits sat at a long table and looked over the reports in their hands. It was clear that this meeting wasn't planned, with most men looking quite haggard and sleep-deprived. Most of them hadn't even buttoned their vests properly. It was already midnight, with the room only lit by torches and candles, but they still weren't done discussing what they were going to do with this new Reborn Company. "What's the problem here, gentlemen? Why are we worried about a soap company?" "It wouldn't affect our important businesses in Kingsbridge," a younger man said, clearly a bit more inexperienced than the rest. The one to answer his question was the bald, old man opposite him. "The problem isn't what they are making now. It's that they're starting to gain popularity within the people. Right now, they're just producing soap and shampoo. But what if they start to produce other products? Given its reputation so far, most people would immediately try out their products because of their popularity." He gestured toward the reports. "Look what happened with their new board game. It immediately got accepted by the majority as their new pastime. That level of influence spells trouble for us. We can't let them take away our customers, or else our business will fail," the bald man said, his words getting angrier as he went on. "We cannot allow that to happen." A heavy silence fell over the room. Finally, someone spoke. "What will we do?" That was the question on everyone's mind. And in this room, there was only one person whose answer mattered, and that person was the owner of the largest company in Kingsbridge and the towns neighboring it. Seated at the very end of the table, his position alone marked his different status. The man rose to his feet, his back straight and his posture firm. He was the only one who had his suit completely clean, unlike the others whose clothes bore creases and specks of dirt or dust from the long meeting. "We can only do nothing," he said plainly. "But Bart, this will affect the inheritance. Don't you want to fight for your father's entire wealth?" The old man with a beard pressed. "I have no plans to compete for the succession of the Vanderbilt company," Bart replied without hesitation. Yes, that was right. The owner of the biggest company in Kingsbridge and the current rival of the Reborn company was none other than Michael's father. After all, this business was what made the Vanderbilt name famous in the first place. This was what had made them the richest family in the world. To be more exact, it was Bart's father, or Michael's grandfather, who had built the Vanderbilt empire and turned it into the global powerhouse it was today. And currently, there was a fight for the inheritance of the entire Vanderbilt company. To determine who was the most fit to succeed him, Michael's grandfather had given away sub-companies to his children and let them manage their respective portions as they saw fit. Bart had been given control of all the Vanderbilt businesses in Kingsbridge and the towns closest to it. His siblings had received the companies abroad or in different countries. They all managed the Vanderbilt name to maintain its supremacy over every business in the world. But despite managing different companies and scattered across the world, there was one goal that the descendants of the Vanderbilt name shared in common. Whoever blossomed their company into a powerhouse would be the one to inherit the entire Vanderbilt wealth. Bart Vanderbilt walked out of the meeting room feeling drained in both mind and body. He had to catch a carriage deep in the night to bring him to their guest house outside of town. As he stepped inside, some of his maids and butlers greeted him, but he only offered a curt greeting before heading straight into the master bedroom. He opened the door and saw that his wife, Lily of Vanderbilt, had just finished bathing herself in the washroom. A soft, amazing floral scent clung to her body, pleasant enough to erase the stress and fatigue in his mind. "Honey, this Reborn soap and shampoo is as amazing as they say," Lily appraised as she dried off her hair with a towel. "Honey, you know they're our competitor, right?" Bart let out a wry chuckle. Even though the Reborn company's influence was starting to affect their business, he couldn't help but praise their amazing products. His wife was obsessed with their cleaning products, while he himself was also a fan of Reborn chess. "You don't actually care about that, right?" Lilia teased, snuggling into his arms. Bart smiled. "Not really. As long as we have enough money to live comfortably, I am more than content with this life. I have no desire to compete with my brothers and sisters for the entire Vanderbilt fortune." Lilia smiled and hugged him even tighter in their bed. This was the very reason she loved him in the first place. "Can we go home soon? I miss my dear boy so much." It had been almost 4 long months since she last held Michael, since she last pinched his adorable cheeks, and she was starting to feel unbearable. "We'll be home soon," Bart promised. "As soon as this business with the Reborn company is settled, we will leave." The two went silent for a moment, letting the candles flicker in their room. "Honey, I'm worried about what will happen to our dear Michael." Bart took a deep breath. Since he had decided that he wasn't going to fight for the inheritance, it meant that Michael wouldn't have the same financial support as he did now. After all, once the inheritance was given to someone else, they would control all the business of the Vanderbilt family, including the ones that Bart was currently managing. This meant that Michael wouldn't have much of an inheritance to take when he got older. This was one of the main reasons why Bart worked hard every second of every day. He wanted to build at least a sizable inheritance for Michael to receive to ensure his son's future, even if it meant that he would have to work away from home all the time and have no time to spend with him in his childhood. "The money I saved up will be enough to get him through life without having to pay for anything," Bart assured her. "All his school or training expenses, anything he will ever need." But this did nothing to alleviate a mother's worry. "Still, I want Michael to have the best life in this world. He's a Vanderbilt. He shouldn't have to worry about money at all." Is there anything we can do so that your father will save at least some of the inheritance for our Michael? Michael had many relatives who were much older than him, meaning that if his grandfather did leave some inheritance, it would only go to his older relatives. But if there was one thing Bart knew about his father, it was that he valued skill above anything else. There is a way, if Michael shows some kind of talent in swordsmanship, magic, or anything else, then my father would have a reason to leave him a sizable inheritance. However, impressing the man who had built the Vanderbilt name from nothing was a hard task to accomplish. If Michael wanted to impress his grandfather and stand out, he would have to be a genius of unparalleled caliber. He has my genes. He's bound to be talented in earth magic, Lilia said, hope gleaming in her eyes. Yes, dear, Bart murmured as he ran a comforting hand through her hair. Even though he said that he knew that the chances of Michael becoming an unparalleled genius in earth magic were slim to none. Even possessing the potential to become a 6-star mage wouldn't be enough. Michael would need to have the potential of a 7-star wizard. But even geniuses failed to reach that stage. Their only hope lay in his awakening once he turned 10 years old. Only then would his true talent manifest, and hopefully, it would be enough to impress his grandfather. ________. Days passed, and life finally settled down enough for Bart and Lydia to return to their estate. They had been away from their home for a total of 4.5 months, but for Lydia, it felt like years. Her fingers impatiently drummed against the carriage's window as they rolled through the forest. Then, as the trees began to thin, she finally caught a glimpse of their home from afar. Her smile widened with anticipation as she imagined her dear Michael welcoming her home with a big hug. But as she gazed at their mansions from afar, her smile slowly curved back down. Even though the estate looked superficially the same as it did when she had left, it felt like everything had changed. There was a certain atmosphere in the air, something that she couldn't quite explain. Her motherly senses were tingling with unease. She was feeling jealous of something, even though she hadn't even seen what was wrong yet. Is something the matter? Bart asked. Lydia then pointed out the window. Did you ask someone to create that strange-looking building? By the side of the mansion stood a stone structure, which had steam rising from the inside. Bart narrowed his eyes and noticed the hot springs as well. No, I didn't order anyone to build that. I don't even know that is. They were so close to the mansion at this point that they could see the maids and the butlers lining up near the entrance to welcome them back from their long journey. Seeing their heads down in what seemed like nervous anticipation, Bart and Lydia knew that something suspicious was going on. The carriage slowly came to a stop and the two stepped out. Welcome home, sir and madam, the maids and butlers greeted in unison. Lydia ignored them and immediately asked the most important question. Where's my little boy? Oh, Mom, Dad, you're back. Michael strolled out of the mansion with the most casual greeting ever. It was as if his mother and father weren't gazing at him with the sternest of looks. Would you care to explain what happened here? Bart asked, gesturing at all the strange additions that happened to the mansion while they were gone for 4 months. Michael rubbed the back of his head. Oh, well, that's a long story. And so, he proceeded to take both his mother and father on a tour of the entire mansion. First, he led them to the kitchen house, which was now fully equipped with plumbing and faucets that supplied clean water for use every day. Flush. Then, with a bit of pride, he demonstrated his new invention to them, the toilet, and showed how it solved the problem of waste in the mansion. Just one push of a button, and everything is flushed away down the pipes connected to the river, he explained. He gave them a very rudimentary explanation as to how the plumbing system worked, and how every pipe that supplied water throughout the house came from the tank on the roof. His father silently examined the metal toilet and faucets, testing them to see if they worked just as easily as Michael claimed. And for what he could see, magic was not the reason why it worked. It was all through the natural way things moved. Surprise and amazement flickered across Bart's face. In all his extensive knowledge of businesses in the world, he had never seen this kind of mechanical advancement before. Such an easy way to deliver fresh water through small metal pipes. It was such a simple idea, yet no one had ever thought of it until now. Even the grand castles of kings and lavish mansions of royals weren't equipped with these kinds of apparatus. They were still stuck with having mages create water or having their maids personally carry water to their chambers. It would have solved so many security issues. After all, having too many helpers could leave a royal vulnerable to potential assassins. It also solved the ever-present problem of cleanliness in the house. With this plumbing system, Bart's business mind immediately saw the potential of this plumbing system. If this was implemented in every home, it would revolutionize the entire world. Michael, do you know who created this contraption? Will you introduce him to me? Bart asked. Michael awkwardly smiled and scratched his head. Of course I know him, father. He's me. Bart's face froze for a second. You created this? How? Michael knew that the time for secrets was over. He was finally going to show his magic to his parents. Reaching out for a small piece of metal on the windowsill, he cast a spell to bend its shape using nothing but the earth mana inside his body. His whole body glowed into an ivy-green aura as the excess mana he used was manifested outward as light. The thin, straight piece of metal was now turned into a miniature framework of a house. Lilia gasped. 2-star spell. Metal bend. As a self-proclaimed genius of earth magic, of course, she could recognize the spell Michael cast. Even Bart was surprised. 2-star spell at just 5 years old. Before Bart could even process this mind-blowing scene he had just witnessed, Lilia grabbed his shoulders and shook him vigorously, almost as if she was trying to rattle the very soul out of his body. Do you hear that, honey? Our son is an earth magic prodigy. Michael, along with the rest of the maids and butlers, instinctively covered their ears from the madam's scream. Oh, my sweet dear boy, you inherited my genes. That's great. I always knew you'd be the most talented magician in the entire universe. Michael struggled to breathe as his mother took him into a big, crushing embrace. If she was this clingy when she found out about his earth magic aptitude, how would she react when she found out he could use all 4 elemental magic? He mentally prepared himself for the inevitable. Bart kneeled and looked Michael in the eye. Even though he tried his hardest to remain calm, there was pride and joy in his eyes whenever he looked at his son. Tell me, son, how did you learn magic? Before Michael could respond, Lilia wrapped her arms around him and pouted at Bart. Of course, it's because I always took him with me whenever I gathered mana. She wasn't wrong. Had she not exposed Michael to magic so early, and if she hadn't shown him how to gather mana while he was a baby, he wouldn't have started learning it so early. He had her to thank for that, but he wasn't going to say that out loud. I remember seeing mages casting spells, Michael said, trying to act like a 5-year-old telling a cute story. I thought they were cool, so I copied what they were doing. Both of them were speechless and exchanged glances. The last time they invited an earth mage into their mansion was when they constructed the building for Michael's first birthday party. If what Michael said was true, then it meant that he was able to remember, memorize, and decode earth magic spells when he was just 1 year old. He said it with such innocence that most people would have made most think that he was just saying something cute, but the essence of his words was nothing short of monstrous. And the faucets? The toilet? How did you know how to create them? Bart asked. Michael shrugged his shoulders. I have a voice inside my head that's telling me what to do, he said ever so innocently. Bart and Lilia looked at each other, trying to seek validation to their surprise. To them, it seemed like Michael was unaware of his own genius. They thought that the voice inside Michael's head was his own subconscious mind. And just like how a genius pianist could create an amazing melody through their intuition alone, Michael could create inventions just through imagination. It seemed that they had given birth to an intuitive genius unlike no other. Haha, Bart chuckled. And here I was, worrying that our son wouldn't be talented enough. Talented wasn't the word. Michael was intellectually smart and gifted in earth magic. He was beyond talented. Our son is a genius. Lydia beamed, squishing her face against Michael's. Ding dong. Just then, they heard a ringing bell echoing in the halls. What's that? Bart asked. Oh, that's the clock, sir. It means that it's time for lunch, Sebastian, their butler, informed him. Clock. Bart nearly passed out when Michael introduced him to the mansion's clock. The sheer complexity of its gears and the pendulum system inside almost made his head spin. It was even more complicated than some magic theories. At first, Bart didn't understand what was so special about the machine. After all, it wasn't as obviously useful as the faucet or the toilet. But when Michael explained to him how the entire day was split into 24 hours and how the clock ticked for a constant amount of time, the realization finally struck him like a lightning bolt. This is magnificent, Bart exclaimed in praise. As a businessman, he understood how important timekeeping was in the industry. For example, everyone in the business industry always had a problem with the shipment of goods between two different places. A shipment that was sent early during the day and would reach its destination before sundown. However, both parties didn't have a precise way to estimate when that shipment would return. After all, they had no frame of reference to how much time would pass before the carriage would reach its destination. Sure, there were sundials and hourglasses, but they were too inconsistent. With this clock, however, everyone could agree on when the shipment would arrive. They would know that the shipment from Kingsbridge to the next town over would need 4 ticks of the clock, or 4 hours. This would revolutionize commerce. And that was just the application he could think of as a businessman. The potential benefits for the public were endless. Bart cleared his throat, forcing himself to not sound too excited. Ahem, another great work, son. Your work is truly one of a kind. Bart had to rein in his enthusiasm for the clock. After all, it wasn't his. No matter how much he wanted his own clock for his business, he wouldn't ask for one. After all, it wouldn't be right to ask a favor from his 5-year-old son. Michael, however, saw right through him. Dad, do you want to have a clock? Bart jolted, his body shaking in excitement. But still, he didn't let his emotions get the best of him. You created this, so it rightfully belongs to you. It wouldn't be appropriate for me to take it for myself. Yet, the gleam in his eyes betrayed his words. He was practically salivating at the thought of having his own clock. It's fine, Dad. Michael waved off his father's concern. I can make one for you. The only problem is that I don't have enough raw materials right now. Bart looked at Michael, anticipation creeping into his voice. Are you sure? Lilia snuggled up to her husband's arms and teased. Foo, stop pretending, dear. I know you want one for yourself. Then, she turned to Michael with a warm smile. Don't worry about the materials, honey. I want you to create that clock and show us how you constructed this magnificent work of art. Lilia's motivations for this were completely different from Bart's. While Bart wanted a clock for practical reasons, she wanted to witness her son perform earth magic to satisfy her desire to see firsthand how much of a genius her 5-year-old son was at it. Since building the clock would take a couple of days, Michael continued the tour, leading his parents to his latest creation, the hot springs. Stepping out of the mansion, they went over to the steaming stone building next to it. The maids and butlers immediately moved to assist them in entering the hot springs by fanning the flames to keep the temperature hot and showing them the proper attire inside. The maids helped Lydia while the butlers assisted Bart. Bart let the steam rise to his face, sighing in satisfaction. This reminded me of the hot baths overseas. He had once visited a distant country famous for its hot springs, a place that drew millions upon millions of foreigners to their country every single year. He would have never thought that Michael could create something similar to those hot springs when there wasn't even a single volcano around. This is relaxing, Bart murmured as he sank deeper into the hot springs. It wasn't just the soothing warmth that relieved him of the stress and fatigue from his body. It was also the fact that his son was a transcendent genius who would have no trouble flourishing in the world. He no longer had any doubt whether Michael's grandfather would leave him any inheritance. The old man would recognize the ingenuity in Michael's inventions and immediately fund him to create more stuff in the future. Bart exhaled, fully at ease, knowing that his son was a genius. Michael was able to create innovative solutions to problems that even the intellectuals hadn't figured out for thousands of years. And if there existed a solution, it would largely involve magic and spells. But Michael was able to create running water with simple physics. This meant that everyone could use this invention, regardless of whether they were poor or rich or whether they had magical abilities or not. You'll do well in the future, son, Bart said. Michael, relaxing next to his father in the hot springs, for some reason, had a strange feeling. He couldn't help but feel that Bart was trying to tell him something, but decided that he was far too young to understand, and let the thought slip away. Michael. Just then, Lilia's voice thundered through the thick stone walls that separated the men's and women's sections of the hot springs. Both father and son flinched, knowing what would come next. A moment later, Lilia stormed into the men's section with a towel wrapped around her body. "What's wrong, Mom?" Michael asked, trying to look as innocent as possible. "What's this I hear about you bathing with the maids?" she asked with a smile, yet her eyes were painted with bloodshed. This is unacceptable. How could you bathe with them and not with me? You're coming over to our side of the hot springs this instant." Just when he thought he had dodged that bullet and was about to excuse himself from bathing in the women's section, he had explicitly told the maids not to mention anything about this to his mother. But it seemed that his mother was a better interrogator than she was a mage. "And don't think you can get away without letting me pinch your cheeks," Lilia added, her hands on her waist. She was serious. To get out of this situation, he knew that there was only one thing he could do. He raised his hand and conjured a ball of water, a small rock, and a flickering flame, before making all of them rotate around his palm using wind magic. "Look, Mom, I can cast all 4 elements." Michael seemed to have vastly underestimated how much fanfare he would get after announcing his world-breaking talent of a quadruple element mastery. His mom and dad immediately leaped out of the hot springs and bombarded him with intense questions about his magic talents. Even though the manifestations of the 4 basic element spells were as clear as day, Lilia and Bart simply couldn't believe their eyes. After all, not even the world's current 9-star Grand Wizard had this kind of talent when he was at the age of 5. It was unheard of, unthinkable to even dream up the fact that a child, who wasn't taught anything about magic during his childhood, actually had the talent to command all the fundamental elements of the universe. To confirm what they were seeing, they had Michael cast the simplest spells such as the Water Ball, Ember Rock Throw, and Wind Blow a couple of times before their very eyes until they were fully convinced. Even then, they still felt like they were dreaming. To erase all doubt, they invited a 5-star wizard from the Magic Tower in Kingsbridge to come and officially assess Michael's talents in the 4 elements. 4 hours later, the wizard arrived at the mansion and started the assessment. Bart paced back and forth anxiously, while Lilia bit her nails as they watched the wizard raise his wand and cast an inspection spell over Michael. "I'm here to assess your mana core," the wizard said, his tone indulgent, as if Michael was a child who needed pampering. Unlike the Vanderbilts who wanted immediate confirmation, the wizard wasn't in a rush. This wasn't the first time a hopeful family had hired him to see if their child was a transcendent talent in the mystic arts and believed that their cold was destined for greatness. Most, if not all the time, the child only ended up having a mediocre talent bound to be stuck below the 5-star realm. The wizard fully expected Michael to be the same. As light mana flowed from his core and gathered at the tip of his wand like a lightning rod, a mystical screen made out of milky white liquid substance materialized between him and Michael. Whatever semblance of mana core Michael had in his body would show up as a bright light on the white screen, confirming what kind of talent he had in the mystic arts, if any. The wizard gasped, stumbling back to keep himself upright. "Invasive magic spell detected. Since you are voluntarily agreeing to the inspection, the magic spell is allowed to pass through your body. Analyzing magic. Magic theory acquired. Mana core inspection. Light and dark element. This magic creates a screen for the caster to peer through a target's body and observe the formation of their mana core. The mana cores will show up as different lights, each corresponding to an elemental affinity." Michael was glad to have finally found out that the stones in his body had an actual name. Mana core, so that's what it's called. More importantly, the best thing he discovered through all of this was that there were other elements besides the 4 basic ones. Case in point, the new 4-star spell he had learned needed light and dark mana, which he currently didn't have any stored in his body. It seemed that gathering those special mana needed some kind of special encounter, or else Michael would have chanced upon them naturally in the world around him so far. He wanted to ask the wizard how he could gather light mana, but the man was too stunned to even speak. "Wizard, what did you see?" Bart said, his voice edged with nervous anticipation. The wizard took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. But every time he looked at the 4 bright, shining lights in the white screen overlaid on Michael's body, he felt like he was going to faint. A vibrant green light, a fiery red glow, a warm brown light, and a cool silvery light shone brightly on Michael's lower abdomen. The mere presence of these 4 lights coexisting under a 5-year-old's body wasn't as problematic as the brightness they emitted. The 4 mana cores were as big as an orange. One would only see this large size and concentration of mana within the cores of adolescent or adult mages, those who had spent years upon years of formal training and cultivated their power. No one would expect, or even believe, that the wizard had seen it in a 5-year-old boy with no training whatsoever. He would have already been considered a 1-in-1,000-year genius just with this mana pool alone. But to have this much mana on all 4 elements, that was, suffice it to say, otherworldly. "He is adept in the 4 elements," the wizard murmured, fixing his tall, pointed hat and wiping the sweat off his forehead. "I have never seen this kind of talent in the mystic arts before. I'm afraid I lack sufficient expertise in properly assessing his talent in magic. I strongly urge you to take him to the magic tower at your earliest convenience. He must not waste his youth and begin training this instant. We are willing to take him under our wings." Formally, Bart was happy to hear that Michael was indeed a genius in the mystic arts. This could pave the way for Michael to become one of the most esteemed wizards in the world that even royals and kings would have to pay respects to. But after hearing the wizard's offer of taking him informally, Bart was a little bit worried. After all, by joining the Guild of Arcana, Michael would have to spend his whole life studying in the magic tower, foregoing all earthly desires to pursue the pinnacle of mystery. Not only that, if Michael got too involved with the mages, his loyalty could shift over from the Vanderbilt family to the Guild of Arcana. While Bart was worrying about the consequences of Michael being too much of a genius, his wife, on the other hand, was worrying about more important things. "So," Lilia demanded the wizard. "What is it, madam?" the helpless wizard asked. "Is his earth element core bigger than the other cores? Tell me he's more talented in earth magic." The wizard hesitated, at a complete loss for words. Life in the Vanderbilt estate has changed drastically since Michael revealed his true magical aptitude to his parents. His daily life now consisted of an early morning tutoring session in earth magic, courtesy of his mother. She crammed all kinds of information into him in an effort to make his earth mana the best out of the 4 elements. She treated it as if it was a competition. "Fu-fu-fu, you're soaking up all the information, as expected of my little genius," Lilia cooed. Despite being forced to wake up early in the morning, Michael didn't mind the tutoring sessions. He was learning a lot of new information about earth magic and spells that he wouldn't have known otherwise. "Earth mana is strongest early in the morning," Lilia explained. "That is when the flowers, plants, stones, and animals wake up to soak all the energy in their surroundings and convert it into earth mana." It was interesting to learn that earth mana wasn't an abstract force. Rather, it came from the life around them. The best way to explain it would be to compare it to the natural cycle of life. Plants soak up light from the sun and convert it into energy. Then, animals eat those plants and use them as their source of energy. Some of that energy would get used up while some of it is thrown away into waste, and also earth mana. Beyond just theory, Lilia also taught him how to meditate properly. The purer mana one could gather to fill their core, the higher the magic output they could achieve. Mana gathering, or meditating, was a foundational practice that all mages needed to master first and foremost. And since Lilia was a genius at earth magic, she was excellent at meditating earth mana. The best way to teach a kid the proper technique was to embrace them and gather mana for them, sort of like a proxy. At first, she was so excited to teach him about mana gathering, but was quickly saddened once she realized that he was already quite adept at meditating. Earth mana, as well as the other 3 elemental manas, revolved around Michael's tiny body like a miniature tornado. It didn't take long before everything was sucked up into his cores, increasing its size by a tiny bit. It was all thanks to ChatJK1, of course. His personal AI assistant was in charge of passively gathering mana for him, even while he was asleep. With nothing left to teach him, his mother then moved to demonstrating a few spells for him. "This is a 2-star spell called Stone Armor," Lilia said as she spread her hands, a brownish aura glowing around her body. Michael watched as slabs of granite materialized in the air above his mother's skin and adhered themselves to her skin like a magnet. It formed a skin-tight armor on her body, protecting the torso, head, arms, and legs. The granite armor made her look like a Norse goddess ready for battle. Analyzing magic theory acquired. Stone armor. Earth element. This magic allows the user to create a protective armor made out of stone and coats the whole body in an invisible protective layer. The armor's aesthetic quality depends on the caster's imagination. The armor's defensive quality depends on the user's mana quality and quantity. Each hit will decrease the user's mana proportionally to the strength of the attack. Before Lilia could even show off her armor to Michael, she saw his body emit earth mana in a similar way she did before casting a stone armor. Chunks of granite stone floated a few inches above his body before sinking to his skin, forming a full-body armor reminiscent of the fantasy heroes he saw in anime. "Cool. Thanks, Mom," Michael said casually, feeling grateful to learn a useful spell. Although she was proud of her son, she couldn't help but feel as if everything about Michael was absurd. It hadn't even taken him a few seconds before he was able to replicate a spell she had spent years of practicing to master it. It was a good thing he was her son, or else she would have considered his talent was too unfair. Because this spell is made out of earth mana, it provides strong defense against wind attacks, she explained. However, it is weak against fire attacks. It turned out that just like in a certain game back in his previous life, all elements followed a cycle of strengths and weaknesses against other elements. Earth was strong against air, but weak against fire. "Understand stone armor, Mom, but I want something that will protect me against all attacks. I don't want any weaknesses in my defense." Lilia shook her head. All spells have their strengths and weaknesses. That was not good enough for Michael. For his life to be comfortable, he needed to be overly powerful in defense. So much so that no enemy could kill him, even if he let them attack him without trying to evade their moves. If there's stone armor, then is there also a water armor? That would surely protect me from fire, unlike stone armor. He asked his mother this question, and the answer was yes. It has a different name, but the concept is the same. It just has different elements, she said, a hint of nostalgia in her voice as she recalled her adventurous life before she settled down. If that's true, then maybe I can stack all kinds of elemental armor all over my body and protect myself from all harm. Michael thought excitedly. ChatJK1, can you create a spell that is similar to stone armor, but with different elements? Apologies. There is insufficient information for me to create spells at the moment. The solution to this problem was to simply learn more spells. Thankfully, he was going to visit the Magic Tower soon. Hopefully, he could get a handful of spells from that place. Can't wait to learn water armor, Michael muttered to himself. Unfortunately, it seemed that his mother had the ears of a sensitive owl. Michael swore he saw her head turn a full 180 degrees while she stared daggers at him. "You what now? I didn't just hear you say you want to learn water spells while I'm here, did I?" "Surely not." Michael let out an awkward laugh and slowly backed away. He should have learned by now how possessive his mother was, even when it came to magic. He tried to excuse himself by saying he was going to do something else, but his mother quickly caught him by the cuffs before he could make an escape. After his early morning tutoring sessions with his mother, Michael spent the afternoons constructing the clock he was planning to give his father. Since this wasn't his first time making one, he managed to refine the design and was able to somewhat shrink its size, making it look like the old grandfather clocks he had seen back in his previous life. Though it was still big, it wasn't as large as a cabinet. The moment his father heard the rhythmic ticking of the clock, he couldn't help but scream out in excitement. "Oh, whoa, wow," Bart exclaimed, completely letting go of all pretenses he had about being dignified. As he watched the pendulum swing back and forth, he seemed to have been mesmerized. He couldn't help but swing his head back and forth as well. Michael couldn't help but laugh as he saw his father become obsessed with the clock to the point that he looked a little bit silly. "Do you like it that much, Dad?" Michael asked, chuckling to himself. He had never seen his father act like this. He always saw his dad as a serious character, treating everything with a no-nonsense attitude. But now, he seemed like a child marveling at a new toy. "I still can't understand how it works or how you created it. But this is amazing, son. Thank you. I can't wait to install it in my office," Bart said as he ruffled Michael's hair. Lilia, ever watchful, smirked. "Now that you have that, you have no excuse for coming home late, right, dear?" She sounded like she was joking, but both father and son knew that it was a real threat. Bart coughed. "Oh, would you look at the time? We better get going now if we want to reach Kingsbridge before lunch. Haha." Michael chuckled. It seemed like he had inherited his ability to fend off Lilia's scary questions from his father. ________. Today was the day they were finally going to Kingsbridge to visit the Magic Tower. The only reason why it had taken them about a week to go to Kingsbridge was because Michael's mother insisted on improving his earth magic a little bit more before he got assessed. Not that it mattered now, because Michael was just excited to finally get the chance to see the mages up close and personal. "Hey, Chad JK1, you're ready to analyze more magic spells, right? I am fully capable of scanning magic spells that are performed in your vicinity." That was what he liked to hear. A few hours later, Sebastian stopped the horses dragging the carriage and peeked through the window. "Sir, madam, young master, we have arrived at Kingsbridge." Michael had heard a lot about Kingsbridge, mostly from Castell's daily report about the Reborn company. According to her, Kingsbridge was a large city whose citizens were a little bit wealthier than the average citizen. The normal inhabitants of this place consisted of rich merchants, renowned swordsman families, and even royalty. It was no surprise that they could sell Reborn soap and shampoo at 1 gold coin a pair. Most people wouldn't be able to afford that, but the people at Kingsbridge were more than wealthy enough to splurge on keeping themselves happy. Michael leaned out the window and saw the tall stone walls surrounding the city, with archers and soldiers stationed at each watchtower. The walls are made out of stone and mortar to provide strength and stability to the structure. Estimated height, 20 meters, or equivalent to a 6-story building. Would you like to know more? No, I'm good, thanks. As expected of a wealthy city, they spared no expense on arming their soldiers to the teeth. The enforcers guarding the gate were clad in full steel armor accented with gold plating around to emanate a royal aura to the soldiers. "I pay respects to the Vanderbilts," said one of the soldiers as he bowed to the passing carriage. Unlike the other travelers, they weren't questioned or had their carriages inspected at the gate and were allowed through without any issue, simply because of the Vanderbilt emblem on their carriage. By the way, their emblem was the symbol of 2 hands cupping an overflowing pile of gold coins, with the image of the planet beneath it. Michael always thought it was excessive, considering they even embedded real gold into their emblem just to show off their wealth. After they were let in, Sebastian steered the carriage toward the massive black spire looming in the distance, the Magic Tower. Meanwhile, Michael leaned further out of the window, eager to take in the sights around. This was the first time he would be witnessing a real medieval city with his own 2 eyes. He had an abstract idea of what they looked like since he frequently watched anime and TV shows depicting this era, but seeing it in real life felt more surreal. The men were wearing finely tailored tunics, while the women were wearing puffy gowns as if it were normal. It almost looked like they were cosplaying, but they weren't. This was their true attire for the day. As the carriage continued to rock through the cobblestone roads of Kingsbridge, Michael's leisurely observation of the city was interrupted by a horrible scent that filled his senses. Ugh! He had to pinch his nose. He couldn't take it anymore. Wabby D. What is that? His parents, however, didn't seem to notice anything wrong. "What's wrong, dear?" his mother asked. Michael looked at them as if they were crazy. "Don't you smell that?" Lilia and Bart exchanged confused glances. They didn't know what was smelling so bad. Then, Bart finally remembered that this was the first time Michael visited Kingsbridge. "Oh, You must be smelling the river dames, Bart explained. Soon enough, the carriage reached a wide bridge leading to the next part of town. Michael looked out the window and finally realized what was smelling so bad. The River Dames was full of pollution. Not just any pollution, it was human pollution, meaning human waste. It then hit him. This world was still stuck in medieval times when human waste was simply thrown into the river with no regard for cleanliness. Michael had been living with modern toiletry in the mansion for so long that this fact had slipped off his mind. Now, that reality was hitting him right in the face. With such a vast city full of wealthy citizens, Michael would have expected that they would spend a lot of money in keeping their surroundings clean. Bhy ade day nod cleaning. Why are they not cleaning? They do, Bart replied. Every week, magicians come and purify the River Dames. From what I know, they just cleaned it yesterday. Yesterday? Michael was stunned. They had cleaned the river only a day ago, yet it was already full of waste. He couldn't believe it. He wouldn't spend a day living in a place that smelled like feces. Yet, the citizens of this city didn't even look dazed as they walked along the bridge. They were too used to the horrible smell. You know what this place needs? A sewage system. Relying on the mages to purify the waste every week is like ignoring the root of the problem. This is just going to spread disease all over the city. Would you like me to explain how a sewage system could work using materials available in this world? ChatJK one suggestion made him think. Should he build a sewage system in Kingsbridge City? Michael set his thoughts aside, at least for now. He doubted that the bigwigs in Kingsbridge would allow him to construct such a large-scale renovation in their city. Soon enough, they arrived at their destination, the towering spire. It was as tall as some skyscrapers from his previous world, with the same texture and color as the obsidian he saw from a certain blocky survival game he played back in his previous life. Interestingly enough, the entrance to the magic tower was a door-like portal that seemed to be made out of swirling green liquid. "We have reached the magic tower," Sebastian announced as he opened the carriage door. "The tower master has been informed of our arrival and will send someone to welcome the young master." Michael immediately stepped out and stretched his body. He couldn't wait to get more useful spells. A few seconds later, the green portal shimmered, and a figure emerged from the other side. A woman in her mid-20s, clad in a green robe and a black pointed hat, which was the typical attire of mages in this world. "Welcome, esteemed guests," she greeted. "We're here to see the Tower Master." "Is he here?" Lilia asked, getting straight to the point. The woman didn't seem to mind her rudeness, and in fact, it actually seemed as if there was a glimmer of admiration in her eyes whenever she looked at Michael's mother. "It is an honor to meet the Earthen Witch," she said, referring to Lilia. "Unfortunately, the Tower Master is currently tending to some other matter for the moment and will not be able to meet you right away. But he will be back in about an hour. TSK, what's that old man up to now?" Lilia muttered, sounding annoyed. From what Michael heard, it seemed as if his mother was acquainted with the Tower Master. "Mom, do you know these people?" Before Lilia could respond, it was the woman who answered. "Of course, little one. Your mother is one of the most talented mages to come out of this magic tower. She was once known as the Earthen Witch of the West. Had she not given up her hat, she might have become the next Tower Master herself." Lilia waved off the woman's praises, treating it as nothing but a thing of the past. "I told you, honey, I was a pretty talented earth mage back in the day. You don't need to learn from the magic tower. I can teach you everything you need to know about earth spells," Lilia said. "Dear, you're being rude." Bart chided his wife gently before turning to the woman. "Should we come back at a later date?" "There's no need," she answered. "The little one here can take a little tour of our magic tower to get him acquainted with our business." Michael's eyes lit up when he heard that. Would he finally be able to see mages hurling one amazing spell after the other? "Can I?" he asked, showing his enthusiasm. "Well, all right. We'll leave him in your care for now," Lilia said, a bit begrudgingly. "Don't worry, Miss Lilia," the woman assured her. "We will take care of the little one." With that, she took Michael's hand and led him toward the entrance of the magic tower. Michael bid farewell to his parents as if he were a kindergarten student getting dropped off at daycare. They were quite busy with some Vanderbilt business and couldn't stay with Michael for the entire day. "So, little Vanderbilt, Why did you want to visit the magic tower? Have you taken an interest in learning magic? Your age is the perfect time to start gathering mana to form a core. Michael looked up at her. They didn't tell you why I'm here? The woman shook her head. No, we're only told that you were to meet the Tower Master. Michael knew that it wasn't going to be a secret, so he blurted out the truth. Well, I'm here to get my magic talent assessed. Oh, that's wonderful. You must have manifested some kind of talent in earth magic, given your mother's talent in it. Michael nodded. Yeah, I guess I'm talented in earth magic. At least, that's what they say. But I haven't met anyone else to compare myself with. The woman smiled. She thought nothing of his words and dismissed them as just a simple rambling of a 5-year-old. As they walked closer to the magic tower, Michael felt the overwhelming presence of mana in the air. It was dense. It was as if he was walking in a sea of mana particles, with lights of all colors swarming his vision. Whoa, Michael murmured. There's a lot of mana here, but why is it imbalanced? There's more fire element than the rest, and there's not a lot of water element. The woman nodded. Yes, that's because... Wait, how can you sense the other mana in the air? I thought you were talented in earth magic. Michael shrugged his shoulders. I'm talented in all of them. The woman stopped dead in her tracks and stared at Michael, her eyes wide open. Meanwhile, unaware of her reaction, Michael continued walking ahead and reached closer to the portal inside the magic tower. And as he did, he sensed something unfamiliar stir within him. Detecting the presence of new mana. Analyzing. Complete. You have now gained the ability to gather 4 new types of mana: light, dark, lightning, and poison.